Yo, Atlas speaking, and welcome to part 3 of What If I Was Reborn in Naruto as the legendary Orochimaru with the Mad Scientist system. Let the tale begin. Chapter 41. The system's answer was simple and straightforward. As long as Orochimaru continued to experiment, all scientific research materials would be provided from the shop. There was no need for him to develop everything from scratch. Orochimaru realized this was like being handed down the results of predecessors' hard work, enabling him to take a significant shortcut on the road of scientific research. Without this support, even with his deep knowledge of genetics, creating any groundbreaking genetic solutions would have been extremely difficult. Just look at the experts of this world. Even developing a single genetic enhancement fluid could easily take a lifetime. Orochimaru. What exactly did you just do? Tsunade, who had been munching on the 2 remaining skewers in her hand, was a bit lost in thought. She still hadn't fully grasped what had happened during the battle earlier. The fight between Orochimaru and Jiraiya had seemed intense, but she had failed to understand the crucial moment. Why hadn't the toad moved when the snake attacked it? Wasn't this different from how such battles normally played out? Orochimaru casually replied, "Oh, that? I just used an illusion." An illusion? Tsunade was caught off guard. Then, as the realization hit, she quickly recovered. Wait, since when did you start using illusions in battle? I've always been able to use them, Orochimaru said calmly. I just never saw the need. I figured I'd give it a try this time, on a whim. In the original timeline, although Orochimaru was famously defeated by Itachi's Genjutsu, his own abilities in illusion were not to be underestimated. Otherwise, how would he have managed to terrify the 3 kids of Team 7 with just a glance? His prowess in Genjutsu was considerable. It was just that when facing prodigies with advanced techniques like Sharingan, the gap became evident. But with no Sharingan or prodigious Uchiha around, Orochimaru's mastery over Genjutsu was more than sufficient to be a formidable weapon. Tsunade was left speechless for a moment. So, you used Jiraiya as a practice dummy? She asked, incredulous. Meanwhile, Jiraiya, who had crashed into the ground and was still lying there, groaned miserably. He had finally honed his skills, formed a partnership with his toad, and was all set to showcase his abilities against Orochimaru. Yet, before he could even unleash his technique, he was taken down with a Genjutsu. It was beyond frustrating. Ah! I still can't beat that snake-like guy, Orochimaru. Jiraiya gazed up at the sky, filled with melancholy. He had a crush on Tsunade, and it was no secret. Everyone knew about his feelings. Unfortunately, it was just as well known that Tsunade didn't reciprocate those feelings. In fact, she often beat him up in response to his antics. He knew that Tsunade had a thing for Orochimaru, and this realization was what spurred him on to get stronger. But no matter how hard he trained, he was always getting beaten. It was like he was stuck in a never-ending cycle of defeat. Damn it! No matter what I do, I can't beat Orochimaru. But even as thoughts of giving up crossed his mind, Jiraiya quickly brushed them aside. No, no. I am the great Jiraiya. I can't give up. I'll find a way to surpass him and win Tsunade's heart. With that, he closed his eyes, falling deep into contemplation. He wouldn't give up. He would keep training, no matter how long it took. In the original timeline, Jiraiya did eventually become strong enough to rival Orochimaru through hard work, talent, and a little bit of luck. After learning Senjutsu, he could stand toe-to-toe with his old friend. But it had taken him years to master sage techniques, and it didn't seem like Orochimaru would be sitting idle during that time either. Orochimaru and Tsunade continued to spar at the training ground until evening. Once they were done, they parted ways, with Orochimaru heading back to his home. Once inside, he pulled up the status panel from his system. Unlock technology, basic gene enhancement serum, gene extraction, gene repair fluid, gene fusion, intermediate enhancement serum. Current technology, cell transplantation. Next unlock, splinter cell. Technology points, 23,000. Orochimaru took one look at the panel and dismissed it, not paying it much mind for now. He knew that while cell transplantation was a useful technique, it wasn't something he was in a hurry to explore. What interested him far more was gene fusion. Gene fusion allowed for the perfect integration of genetic traits, whereas cell transplantation merely stitched together parts in a crude manner, often leading to inefficiencies or deformities. The results were clear. Yamato, who had undergone cell transplantation with the first Hokage's DNA, had only managed to harness a fraction of the original would-release abilities. His power paled in comparison to the actual first Hokage. The only advantage cell transplantation had was that it was cheap and easy to perform. All it took was some basic surgical skills and medicine. But gene fusion, on the other hand, was far more intricate and powerful. Orochimaru sighed. Well, I'll wait to see what Konoha's higher-ups decide before rushing into anything. With that, he lay down on his bed and drifted off to sleep. For the next few days, Orochimaru lived a relatively relaxed life. He spent his time exploring the village, eating, occasionally training, and even enjoying the public baths. With no pressing missions or urgent experiments, he found himself with plenty of free time. Finally, on the fourth day, Hirusan summoned Orochimaru to his office. As Orochimaru entered, Hirusan smiled warmly. Orochimaru, after thinking long and hard over the past few days, I've come to a decision. You are both my most talented disciple and a gifted researcher. Orochimaru nodded, listening carefully to his sensei's words. Hirusan continued, but before making any decisions, I wanted to hear your thoughts. Where do you see yourself going? What path do you want to pursue moving forward? Chapter 42, Hirusan's words left Orochimaru stunned. What do you mean by this, teacher? Oh, I didn't make it clear. Hirusan laughed. What I mean is, although you have exceptional talent both as a ninja and in scientific research, a person's energy is limited. If you focus on one field, you can achieve greatness in that area. You're still young, so it seems you can manage both for now. But as you grow older, it will become increasingly difficult. As your teacher, I feel it's my responsibility to guide you correctly. Orochimaru, understanding the implication, asked, Are you suggesting that I should choose one and give up the other? It was akin to choosing a major in modern times. With talent in both fields, focusing on one would likely yield better results. Trying to balance both might lead to failure in each. Hirusan nodded. Yes, that's what I mean. Can I choose both? Orochimaru asked tentatively. He knew Hirusan's concern was well-intentioned, and the reality was as Hirusan had described. Balancing two completely different fields like ninjutsu and scientific research was indeed challenging. However, Orochimaru had a system that provided him with over 95% of the necessary knowledge instantly. He could absorb this information in an hour or two, allowing him to focus on scientific research without interfering with his ninja training. Hirusan pondered for a moment and replied with some worry, It's possible, but it's very risky. He truly didn't want Orochimaru's potential to go to waste. It's okay, teacher. Orochimaru said calmly. I've always been focused on improving my strength. Studying these things is just a hobby. Hobby? Hirusan was taken aback, then twitched his lips. You're only 8 years old and have already developed such an advanced recovery potion as a hobby? How do you expect the top researchers in Konoha to feel? But Hirusan, as Hokage, refrained from saying anything too harsh. Instead, he thought about it and realized Orochimaru's dedication. Since graduating, Orochimaru had consistently attended every gathering, training session, and mission. Each time, he performed exceptionally well. Could it be that he was indeed managing to make these breakthroughs in his spare time? In awe, Hirusan took a deep breath and praised him, It's astonishing. Well, now that you've made your decision, I will support you no matter what. He then knocked on his desk, and an ANBU agent wearing an animal mask appeared holding a money box. The ANBU handed the box to Sarutobi Hirusan and then disappeared. Hirusan pushed the money box towards Orochimaru. Here are 2 million ryo. Though it's less than what your scientific research results are worth, take it for now. If you need anything in the future, just let me know, and I will do my best to help. Thank you, teacher. Orochimaru responded without hesitation. He did not refuse the money, as he knew he deserved it. Despite the 2 million ryo being meager compared to the value of his technology, it was a start. Orochimaru had managed to find substitutes for rare medicinal materials and was confident in the value of his technology. Well then, you may go. I'll arrange for someone to contact you later. Yes. Orochimaru took the money box and left. After Orochimaru's departure, Danzo emerged from the lounge adjacent to the office. Hirusan, your disciple is remarkable. How about letting him join me? Danzo asked. Hirusan's expression changed. Danzo, you wanted to establish an independent ANBU training class, and I agreed without objection. But this child is not even 9 years old. ANBU requires training from a young age. Moreover, this boy has the potential to become a great ANBU. Danzo retorted. ANBU missions are more confidential and require higher loyalty. Training from a young age can ensure greater brainwashing and loyalty. Additionally, ANBU often undertake morally ambiguous tasks, necessitating a certain dark side. Hearing Danzo's argument, Hirusan paused, recalling the time Orochimaru had killed an unarmed Kumo ninja during a mission. Hirusan's eyes narrowed slightly. Orochimaru is still too young. I don't want to take any chances with him. Chapter 43, Danzo had just established the Root Division and was eager to inject fresh blood into it. That's when he noticed Orochimaru. Just like he would later notice Kakashi. Why did Danzo focus on them? Because Orochimaru and Kakashi shared two critical traits, unparalleled ninja talent and a lurking darkness deep within. In Danzo's mind, such talents naturally belonged in his department. Letting them grow outside his control would be a waste of potential. However, at this stage, because the foundation of the root was still unstable, Danzo was forced to obey the orders of the third Hokage, Hirusan. But as for Orochimaru, he had already taken note of Danzo. To the general public, Danzo was seen as a man of immense ambition, selfish, power-hungry, and utterly ruthless in his desire to ascend to the position of Hokage. A dangerous figure, no doubt. But to Orochimaru, Danzo wasn't nearly as threatening. Why? Because in Orochimaru's eyes, Danzo was actually quite pitiful. Yes, his ambition was vast. He longed to become Hokage and lead Konoha to dominate the ninja world. But he lacked the strength to support those ambitions. Forget leading Konoha to unify the entire ninja world, he never even sat in the Hokage's chair, which was his most basic goal. For his entire life, Danzo was suppressed by Hirusan, never able to truly rise above. What's more pathetic than a man whose ambitions far outstrip his power? A careerist without the strength to match his goals could never stir up a true storm. In both the past and present, Orochimaru never regarded Danzo as a true threat. At best, he saw him as a useful tool. A tool whose authority, selfishness, and ambition could be leveraged to accomplish things Orochimaru himself found tedious. Suddenly, a familiar voice rang out from a distance. Oi, Orochimaru! Looking up, Orochimaru saw the familiar figure of Jiraiya speeding toward him, leaving a gust of wind in his wake. Oh, Orochimaru! What's that in your hand, a money box? How much is inside? That's a pretty big box. 2 million ryo. Jiraiya's eyes widened in shock. Wah! Did you just complete an S-rank mission or something? More or less, Orochimaru replied nonchalantly. In the world of ninjas, each bill is worth 1,000 ryo. So, for 2 million ryo, a box of this size was perfect. An S-rank mission often yields a maximum payout of around 2 million ryo, so Jiraiya's assumption wasn't far off. Wow, impressive. Upon hearing Orochimaru's confirmation, Jiraiya's envy was palpable. He must have deduced that Orochimaru had submitted the super recovery potion formula to the village. How else could a genin like Orochimaru get assigned such an S-rank mission, let alone earn such a hefty reward? Orochimaru, noticing Jiraiya's awe, interrupted his thoughts with a casual invitation. "Let's go. I'll treat you to barbecue." Instantly, Jiraiya's mood flipped. His earlier gloom vanished, and his eyes sparkled with excitement. "You serious?" Despite the fact that a Genin's earnings were usually enough to support a small family, Jiraiya was notoriously bad at saving money. As a result, luxury items like barbecue were a real treat for him. Seeing Orochimaru's nod, Jiraiya needed no further encouragement. He was already beaming with joy. Although 2 million ryo wasn't a fortune, it was still a considerable sum. After having money in hand, Orochimaru quickly began making plans. The first thing he did was treat Jiraiya and Tsunade to a barbecue. Afterward, he used the rest of the money to buy a larger house for himself. In Konoha, property wasn't particularly expensive. A 3-story house covering 150 square meters cost less than 1 million ryo. The only hassle was that purchasing a house required approval from the Hokage. But given Orochimaru's current standing, Hirusan had no reason to refuse his request. The next evening, just before Orochimaru began moving into his new home, several ANBU arrived at his door and knocked. Orochimaru opened the door to find a familiar figure standing before him, a man wearing a fox mask, his voice carrying a slight smile. "Orochimaru, we meet again. And who might you be?" "Fox?" Orochimaru's pupils narrowed as he quickly pieced together the man's identity. After all, they had previously carried out missions together. The man in the fox mask nodded slightly. "That's right. I came to thank you for your help last time." "There's no need for that. Even without my serum, your injury could have been healed," Orochimaru said with indifference. "So, what brings you here?" "Well, on the Hokage's orders, I'm here to escort you to your new workstation at the experimental base. We've also come to help you move your equipment." "I see." Orochimaru glanced at the 5 ANBUs standing behind Fox and gave a brief nod. "Come in and help yourselves." With Orochimaru's approval, the ANBU members entered the house in single file. At first, they were a bit surprised to see how young Orochimaru was, but their real shock came when they saw his laboratory. The amount of advanced experimental equipment a mere 8 or 9-year-old possessed was staggering. However, they were ANBU, and this mission was classified, so they naturally didn't pry. Without asking any unnecessary questions, they took out their space scrolls and began moving Orochimaru's equipment. The ANBU operated swiftly, and in less than an hour, every piece of equipment in Orochimaru's lab had been moved. Fox then led the group, with Orochimaru following close behind, as they leapt across rooftops and swiftly arrived at Konoha's secret experimental base. It was a relatively large building situated in a quiet corner of the village. The area around it was heavily guarded, with 4 sentinels stationed at the entrance. Fox approached the guards, exchanged a series of coded signals, and then escorted Orochimaru into the building. The base itself was located underground. It was well lit, and several staff members were already busy with their work. Fox pointed toward 2 spacious and immaculately clean laboratories. "According to the Hokage's arrangement, these 2 labs are now yours." Chapter 44. The 2 rooms were quite spacious, with only the bare essentials tables and chairs leaving plenty of open space. It was perfect for Orochimaru to set up his work. Satisfied with the arrangement, Orochimaru instructed the ANBU to place the experimental equipment in the designated spots. He began to familiarize himself with the environment. The basement had about 8 or 9 rooms, but there weren't many staff members, just 4 or 5 researchers. When they saw Orochimaru, their reactions were predictable. They stared at the young boy standing before them, clearly surprised. "The one arriving today is just a child? Incredible." "Hey, kid, what's your name?" one of the researchers asked, raising his chin at Orochimaru dismissively. "Orochimaru," he replied, his tone calm and unbothered. The researcher didn't seem to care much and waved him off. "All right then, take a look around if you want." Seeing that the researchers were preoccupied, Orochimaru didn't bother them further. He stood back and quietly observed their work. The researchers appeared to be dissecting a corpse. Judging by the forehead protector they had removed and placed nearby, the body belonged to a Kumo ninja. Orochimaru watched the procedure carefully, taking note of the precision with which the researchers handled the corpse. Despite being minor players in the field, these researchers clearly had a strong grasp of anatomy. Such professional dissection techniques could only come from years of clinical experience. Though Orochimaru had become adept at creating enhancement serum and other chemical compounds, his understanding of anatomy and surgery was still largely theoretical. If he wanted to become a truly great scientist, he would need to master the scalpel. Yes. He made up his mind on the spot. He already possessed numerous high-tech tools that allowed him to control experiments with great precision. But before he delved deeper into them, he needed to develop a solid understanding of biological dissection. With a clear goal and direction, Orochimaru turned away after observing for a few minutes, ready to embark on this next phase of his research. The night passed without incident. Early the next morning, Orochimaru got to work. Since most of his experimental equipment had been transferred from his old house, all that remained were a few essential items and daily necessities. However, to his surprise, Tsunade and Jiraiya had shown up early to help him pack. They'd overheard him mentioning the move during dinner the previous evening, and despite their usual antics, they had come to assist him. What was even more surprising was Jiraiya's presence. Given how Tsunade and Orochimaru had constantly beaten him in sparring matches and the way they teased him, it was almost amusing that Jiraiya still showed up to help. He was like an indestructible cockroach. No matter how hard you tried, you couldn't get rid of him. "Hey, Jiraiya," Tsunade said as she sat cross-legged on the tatami like a big sister giving advice, "you should learn from Orochimaru. Look at him, he's already bought his own house at such a young age. And you? You're still. How can I even compare?" Jiraiya replied, brushing off her comment. "Besides, if I manage to save that much money, will you be my girlfriend?" This guy, not only was he thick-skinned, but he also had no filter when he spoke. "I don't care what you say about me, but I'm into beautiful girls. That's just the way I am." "Deal with it," Jiraiya added, grinning shamelessly. "If you don't like it, feel free to beat me up." Tsunade scoffed, looking at him with utter disdain. "Be your girlfriend? Keep dreaming. Then why do you care so much about me, huh?" Jiraiya shot back, his tone playful. "You're always going on about Orochimaru this, Orochimaru that. It's so annoying." "Oh, so that's how it is?" Tsunade's smile turned dark as she cracked her knuckles. "You think I care, huh? Orochimaru." Orochimaru raised an eyebrow, already sensing what was about to happen. "You're not planning to come back to this old house, right?" Tsunade asked sweetly. "No," Orochimaru replied with a hint of amusement, "this place is too old and cramped. I won't be back here." "Good!" Tsunade's expression changed instantly as she loomed over Jiraiya. "In that case, I won't have to hold back." Wait. What are you going to do?" Jiraiya stammered, suddenly realizing the grave mistake he'd made. Cold sweat dripped down his forehead as he instinctively took a step back. "Go to hell!" Tsunade's figure blurred as she disappeared from her spot and reappeared directly in front of Jiraiya, her fist already cocked back. Boom! Tsunade's punch sent Jiraiya flying with such force that he smashed through the wooden wall of Orochimaru's old house, crashing through it with a loud crack. His screams echoed in the distance as he disappeared into the air, his voice growing fainter and fainter. Tsunade dusted off her hands, completely unbothered by the destruction. She turned to Orochimaru with a bright, innocent smile. "Oops, sorry. I didn't mean to break your house. But since you're not planning to keep it, you don't mind, right?" Orochimaru stared at the gaping hole Jiraiya had left in his wall, then at Tsunade's cheerful face. A small, rare smile tugged at the corner of his lips. For a moment, he couldn't help but feel a twinge of amusement. "Not at all," he replied, casting a quick glance at the distant sky where Jiraiya had vanished. "I'll just consider it an early farewell to this place." Still, in his mind, Orochimaru silently mourned for Jiraiya. That poor guy. He never learned when to keep his mouth shut. Chapter 45. But, if you think about it carefully, Jiraiya kind of deserved what he got. I mean, you know Tsunade is a violent person, yet you keep messing with her? Time and time again? It's like he's got a death wish or something. This wasn't the first time. It definitely wouldn't be the last either. Honestly, he was just asking for it. Time passed, and Orochimaru had nearly finished packing up his belongings. Jiraiya eventually returned, limping back into the house through the large hole in the wall with a huge lump on his head. Man, Orochimaru, you're so not cool. You just stood there and let her beat me up. Jiraiya complained, rubbing the knot on his head with a pout. He looked genuinely hurt, both emotionally and physically. He had thought he was safe in Orochimaru's home. After all, Tsunade usually restrained herself when they were in Orochimaru's territory. She liked him, after all, and she rarely got violent around him. That's why Jiraiya had felt so confident in provoking her today. But Orochimaru had unexpectedly cooperated with Tsunade, saying that he wasn't coming back to this house anymore, giving her the green light to go all out. She used the body flicker technique, Orochimaru said casually, not even bothering to look at Jiraiya. His meaning was clear: Tsunade's attack was too fast to stop. Of course, Jiraiya didn't believe that for a second. What are you talking about? Your body flicker technique is way faster than hers. You did this on purpose. So what if he did? Tsunade cut in with a smirk. Orochimaru is my boyfriend now. Why would he help a perverted creep like you? B-boy, friend? Jiraiya was floored, his eyes wide with shock. Had Tsunade and Orochimaru really gotten together? When did this happen? And why didn't he know? Suddenly, a rush of emotions flooded his heart, and a sense of overwhelming sadness threatened to spill over. It was like his entire world had come crashing down around him. Tsunade's words had caught even Orochimaru off guard. When had he agreed to that? He hadn't, obviously. She was just messing with Jiraiya to get under his skin. Still, Orochimaru glanced at her out of the corner of his eye, slightly amused. Tsunade, always the troublemaker. Jiraiya, however, completely bought the lie. His shoulders sagged in defeat, and a deep look of depression crossed his face. Shaking his head, Orochimaru ignored the exchange and focused on packing the last of his belongings. With everything ready, he began making his way toward his new home. Seeing Orochimaru leave, Tsunade and Jiraiya quickly followed. Orochimaru's new house was located in the northwest corner of Konoha village, not far from the Hyuga clan estate. It was large and modern, a significant upgrade from the old house he had just left behind. As they approached the bustling street in front of the Hyuga compound, Orochimaru took a deep breath, feeling a sense of satisfaction. The streets were lively, filled with vendors and residents going about their daily business. Just then, something caught Orochimaru's eye. Two little boys, barely old enough to walk, were waddling around in crotchless pants, laughing as they played. They were identical twins, their features strikingly similar, and they looked like they were just learning how to walk. Orochimaru's gaze shifted to the Hyuga clan emblem on the gate behind the children, and he couldn't help but feel a strange sense of fate. It's been nearly 3 years since I came to this world, and these two little brothers Hyuga Hayashi and Hyuga Hizashi are only about 1 year old now, Orochimaru thought to himself. To think that I'll witness their entire growth and see their rise in the near future. Orochimaru's mind briefly wandered to other notable figures in this generation. Uchiha Fugaku, for instance, was already 4 years old. The future leaders of Konoha's clans were still in their infancy. The children of Kakashi's and Gai's generation wouldn't be born for some time yet. In fact, many of their fathers weren't even much older than Orochimaru himself. It was an odd sensation watching it all unfold before his eyes. In a way, it was like witnessing the future legends of the ninja world grow up from scratch. Amusing, yet strange. After dropping off the last of Orochimaru's things at his new house, Tsunade and Jiraiya stayed to help him get settled. Though Tsunade wasn't the most domesticated person, she was still a ninja and more than capable of handling chores that normal people might struggle with. As for Jiraiya? Well, despite being constantly beaten and teased by the other two, his thick skin and resilient spirit never wavered. He had a heart like a forest, vast, patient, and enduring. That was part of his charm. Though Jiraiya had been on the receiving end of most of the abuse, he had long accepted that Orochimaru was his rival. Defeating Orochimaru had become his driving force, his obsession. As a result, he never took the teasing too personally and always came back stronger. So, despite the earlier outburst, the three spent the rest of the day together, helping Orochimaru organize his new home. It was a rare moment of camaraderie, one that hinted at the deep bonds they shared, even if it wasn't always obvious. By nightfall, Jiraiya and Tsunade left. Orochimaru was finally alone in his spacious, bright new house. He stretched out, enjoying the solitude for the first time that day. Walking over to a large mirror, Orochimaru gazed at his reflection. His long, flowing hair, pale skin, and sharp features stared back at him. His lips curled into a small, self-satisfied smirk. As expected of the Sharingan, Orochimaru muttered softly, his gaze narrowing. In the mirror, his golden, slit-like pupils suddenly began to change. The brilliant gold darkened, shifting into a deep, eerie scarlet. Around his pupils, 3 tomo spun, evenly spaced, giving his eyes an almost otherworldly appearance. The Sharingan. Orochimaru took a deep breath, his scarlet eyes gleaming for a moment before he shut them. When he opened his eyes again, the red had vanished, replaced by his natural golden eyes. If anyone else had seen this transformation, they would have been shocked beyond belief. After all, the Sharingan was a Kekkai Genkai, a bloodline limit unique to the Uchiha clan. How could someone from an ordinary ninja family like Orochimaru possess it? But the truth was far more twisted. Yes, this was the Sharingan, the Uchiha clan's signature ability, awakened in Orochimaru's body. It wasn't the result of a transplant. No, Orochimaru had gone far beyond that. Through his gene fusion experiments, Orochimaru had extracted the genetic material of several Uchiha clan members who had awakened the Sharingan from the hospital and successfully fused those genes into his own body. Unlike conventional transplants that required powerful emotions to awaken the eye, Orochimaru had bypassed those limitations. His Sharingan was fully awakened, and even more impressive, it was already at the 3-tomo level, the pinnacle of the standard Sharingan. For the ninja world, this would be an unfathomable achievement and impossible feat. But for Orochimaru? It had been done with ease. Chapter 46. According to Orochimaru's research, the reason the Uchiha clan is prone to being warlike and arrogant lies within their genetic structure. Their genes contain a special power that is triggered by heightened emotional state and spiritual energy. This stimulation manifests as their famed Sharingan, which is essentially a physical representation of their immense spiritual power. However, there's a catch. The mental energy tied to the Sharingan is so vast and powerful that even modern Uchiha bodies struggle to contain it. Any significant emotional or external stimulation can easily cause mental instability. The extent of this instability varies, ranging from becoming excessively combative and prideful at best, to outright madness at worst. Because their bodies aren't strong enough to suppress the overwhelming spiritual power of the Sharingan, many Uchiha end up acting irrationally. This could explain why Tobirama Senju, the second Hokage, once called the Uchiha the clan of evil. Still, Orochimaru, with his knowledge of the plot, understands that the Sharingan isn't inherently evil. The source of its power traces back to something much older and more complex, the chakra fruit of the God Tree. According to legend, the God Tree is the Ten Tails, a monstrous entity that serves as the source of all chakra. Kagaya Akatsuki, the progenitor of chakra, consumed the chakra fruit of the God Tree, which caused a drastic shift in her personality and granted her overwhelming power. The chakra fruit's energy merged with her body, and these abilities were passed down to her descendants. Orochimaru's analysis and knowledge of the show deduced that Kagaya's power is divided into three distinct aspects. Her own power, the Byakugan, and ocular jutsu passed primarily to the Hyuga clan. The God Tree's power, the Sage's body, representing physical energy and durability. And finally, the Chakra Fruit's power, the Nine-Tomo Rinne Sharingan, which represents spiritual energy and advanced ocular jutsu, like the Sharingan and Renegan. Initially, these three powers were unified in Kagaya. But as her bloodline spread through generations, the powers split, becoming less concentrated. Orochimaru focused primarily on the powers of the God Tree and the Chakra Fruit. If the God Tree represents the root of chakra and physical energy, then the Chakra Fruit is the source of immense spiritual power, the force behind the Sharingan and Renegan. Kagaya had two sons, Hamura and Hagoromo, the Sage of Six Paths. Each inherited a portion of her power. Hamura received Kagaya's Byakugan, which was passed down to the Hyuga clan. Hagoromo inherited both the Sage's body and ocular powers, which he passed on to his sons, Asura and Indra. From this point, their powers began to diverge. Asura inherited Hagoromo's physical energy, granting him a strong body and vast chakra reserves. His descendants became the Senju clan. Indra, on the other hand, inherited the eye power, passing down the Sharingan to his descendants, the Uchiha clan. This divergence in power created a fundamental difference between the two bloodlines. Asura's descendants, the Senju, were unaffected by the mental strain that accompanied the Sharingan. Their chakra and physical energy granted them strong, stable minds with a natural inclination toward kindness and cooperation. Indra's descendants, however, inherited the immense mental power of the Sharingan. With it came a tendency toward extreme emotions. The greater their spiritual power, the greater their potential for instability. This explains why so many Uchiha become obsessed with power, often spiraling into madness when faced with loss or failure. For example, Indra, Hagoromo's eldest son, became consumed by a lust for power, even going as far as killing his own kin. Madara Uchiha sought the infinite Tsukuyomi after his younger brother's death. Obito Uchiha turned against the world after the death of his childhood love, Rin. Itachi Uchiha committed the massacre of his clan to prevent another war. And Sasuke Uchiha sought to destroy Konoha after learning of his brother's tragic fate. In each case, the immense spiritual power of the Sharingan pushed them to extremes. All of this leads to one conclusion. Orochimaru realized that the Sharingan, as a power tied to the chakra fruit, is inherently unstable. The immense spiritual energy it generates requires a strong enough body to balance it. Even the basic three-tomo Sharingan has the potential to drastically affect its user's personality. For most Uchiha, their bodies simply aren't strong enough to handle the mental strain, which makes them prone to emotional volatility. For Orochimaru, who has enhanced his own body using intermediate gene enhancement serums, the three-tomo Sharingan is already the limit of what he can handle. Anything beyond that, like the Mangekyo Sharingan, would overwhelm him, causing his body to break down under the immense spiritual power. In fact, after Hagoromo's era, the bloodlines of Asura and Indra diverged even more. The balance between their physical and spiritual energies weakened with each generation. By the time their descendants evolved into the Senju and Uchiha clans, the divide was clear. The Senju retained the Sage's body, with its strong physical energy, but had little to no ocular power. The Uchiha, on the other hand, retained the ocular power, but many lacked the physical strength necessary to contain it. Worse, as their bloodlines continued to dilute, fewer members of either clan could awaken the full potential of their powers. Many Uchiha, for instance, couldn't even awaken the basic Sharingan, and many Senju lost their renowned physical prowess. What Orochimaru seeks to do is collect the genes of Uchiha members capable of awakening the Sharingan and use them to enhance his own eye power. Some of these individuals have already awakened the Sharingan, while others have not. However, the mere potential in their genes is enough for Orochimaru's purposes. The more Sharingan genes Orochimaru collects, the stronger his ocular power will become after he fuses them with his own. If Orochimaru gathers enough Sharingan genes, unlocking the Mangekyo Sharingan would be inevitable. Based on the Uchiha blood samples he's obtained from Konoha Hospital over the past 2 years, he already has enough to awaken the 3-Tomo Sharingan, but the Mangekyo Sharingan remains out of reach. Mainly due to one key issue, the Mangekyo Sharingan being too hard to awaken, and many of the Uchiha who had awakened their Mangekyo Sharingan didn't leave blood samples behind in hospitals. Even if Orochimaru could access their genes, his current body isn't strong enough to handle the immense power of the Mangekyo Sharingan. For now, Orochimaru will have to be patient, continuing his research until his body can withstand the next level of Sharingan power. Chapter 47. Even if Orochimaru were to collect enough Sharingan genes and successfully fuse the Mangekyo Sharingan with his body, he wouldn't necessarily lose his mind. However, there would certainly be mental side effects. The intense spiritual power required to wield the Mangekyo would undoubtedly affect his psyche. When using the advanced abilities of the Mangekyo Sharingan, the body is put under incredible strain. Over time, side effects such as myopia, eye bleeding, and severe physical pain are almost guaranteed. The sheer power of the ocular jutsu overloads the body's capacity to manage the strain, leading to these complications. Some might wonder, if a body is strong enough, does that mean using the Mangekyo Sharingan would have no side effects? The answer is yes. With a strong enough body, the side effects can be minimized or even eliminated. Take Uchiha Mito, for example. After transplanting the cells of the first Hokage, and later integrating White Zetsu's body, he was able to use his Mangekyo Sharingan freely, without suffering from common side effects. He didn't experience bleeding eyes, myopia, or body pain, despite constantly using powerful techniques like Kamui. Orochimaru hypothesized that after using an advanced genetic enhancement serum, he, too, would be able to use the Mangekyo Sharingan without those physical side effects. Moreover, if he managed to fuse the cells of the first Hokage into his body, it would even be possible for him to use the Renegan without difficulty. To Orochimaru, the Renegan was far more advanced than the Mangekyo Sharingan, at least a full level above it in terms of power and capability. Mito, despite having the first Hokage's cells, struggled when it came to the Renegan. It was clear that simply integrating Hashirama's cells wasn't enough to fully master it. Even with the strength of those cells, the Renegan was too much for his body to handle comfortably. Using a pair of Renegan? That was an entirely different challenge. To control both eyes of the Renegan, a ninja would need the physique of someone from the Uzumaki or Senju clans, those with an exceptionally strong life force and chakra reserves. Just transplanting Hashirama's cells wasn't enough. But then, there was Uchiha Madara. He didn't have the natural physique of an Uzumaki or a Senju, yet he could wield both Renegan eyes without difficulty. Why? Because he was the reincarnation of Indra, possessing the chakra of Hagoromo's eldest son. Madara's lineage gave him direct access to the power of the Sage of Six Paths, making his situation unique. Orochimaru pondered over these things. I'll only know for sure once I obtain and experiment with the first Hokage's cells, he thought. Hashirama's DNA was the key to unlocking the true potential of the Mangekyo and, eventually, the Renegan. Satisfied with his conclusions, Orochimaru stopped thinking about it for the time being. He closed his eyes and quickly fell into a deep sleep. The First Shinobi World War officially ended following the deaths of the second Hokage and the second Reikage. Their sacrifices led to the rise of Hirusan Sarutobi as the third Hokage, marking the end of the conflict. Since the coup that killed the second Hokage was instigated by Kinkaku and Ginkaku, two rogue shinobi, it was deemed unrelated to the Land of Lightning. As such, the peace-loving Konoha didn't pursue further retaliation. With Hirusan now in power and Danzo establishing his secretive organization, Root, Konoha entered a period of formal development and recovery. Year 20 of Konoha's calendar. 4 months had passed since Orochimaru moved into his new home. In total, it had been 3 years since Orochimaru arrived in this world. Another beautiful, colorful morning broke over Konoha village. The sunlight crept through the curtains, gently waking the village to a fresh new day. In the Hokage's office, the third Hokage sat at his desk, hands resting on his chin as he looked thoughtfully at the 3 young shinobi standing before him: Orochimaru, Tsunade, and Jiraiya. As their teacher, Hirusan felt a deep responsibility to guide them, but now that he was Hokage, he had other duties that kept him from teaching them as closely as he once had. He could no longer run around with his students, personally completing missions and offering on-the-job instruction. Still, Hirusan made sure his students had access to resources that most civilian ninjas did not, ensuring they were equipped for success. But accompanying them on missions? That was no longer possible. After all, it wasn't as if the Hokage could just run around with his students in peacetime. Today, however, Hirusan had called the three of them to discuss their future missions. Among the three, Jiraiya was a bit careless and prone to outrageous behavior. Tsunade had a fiery temper and could easily lose control in unexpected situations. Only Orochimaru was consistently calm and collected. As Hirusan thought about these things, he finally spoke. Orochimaru, from today onward, you will be the captain of this team. What? Tsunade was taken aback, but it was Jiraiya who exclaimed in disbelief. Why? Jiraiya demanded. Why is Orochimaru the captain? I can do it too. I mean, look at me. Jiraiya-sama is handsome, skilled, and more than qualified to lead this team. Hirusan smiled slightly but said nothing. Tsunade, however, scoffed and rolled her eyes. Jiraiya, do you even know your own abilities? Tsunade shot back, not holding back her criticism. What do you have over Orochimaru? Is it your strength? Your resilience? Your judgment? Oh, wait, maybe it's your perversion that's superior. Tsunade, that's not fair. Jiraiya protested angrily. Don't look down on me. Isn't it true, though? Tsunade teased, giving him a sly smile. Big pervert. The two were moments away from bickering again when Hirusan raised his hand to silence them. Enough. Among the three of you, Orochimaru is the most suitable to be the captain. From today forward, he will lead your missions. Knock knock knock. Before Hirusan could finish, someone knocked on the office door. Come in, he said. The door opened, and a middle-aged man wearing glasses and a white coat rushed in, visibly excited. Hokage-sama. The experiment was successful. The experiment was successful, the man exclaimed, his voice full of enthusiasm. However, as soon as he spotted Orochimaru, he paused, his excitement briefly fading. Ah, teacher, you're here too? Teacher? Tsunade and Jiraiya blinked in confusion, staring at the man. Did he just call Orochimaru, teacher? This was unexpected. What was going on? Orochimaru remained calm, unfazed by the strange looks. Don't mind me. Continue with your report. Yes, of course, teacher. The man in the white coat nodded and turned back to Hirusan. Hokage-sama, the recovery potion experiment, it was a success. Success? Hirusan's eyes sharpened with interest. Explain in detail. Yes, Hokage-sama. Based on the research given by Orochimaru-sensei, I began developing the recovery potion 3 months ago. I'm happy to report that we have finally achieved a breakthrough. Chapter 48. The man in the white coat was passionately recounting the experimental process from the past few months with great enthusiasm. He was Harano, a medical ninja from Konoha Hospital with extensive expertise. After receiving an order from above, he had been working closely with Orochimaru to learn the production of the genetic repair fluid, which was called the recovery potion by them. Throughout the process, Harano had been astounded by Orochimaru's extraordinary talent and deep insights into genetics. Every now and then, with just a few suggestions or adjustments, Orochimaru would enlighten him, leaving him in awe of the young genius. Before long, Harano couldn't resist the temptation and officially became Orochimaru's disciple. It might sound unbelievable for a middle-aged man in his 40s to apprentice under a boy who wasn't even 10 yet, but it was the truth. Orochimaru, though, played along, pretending to study with Harano for a short while before passing him an improvised, incomplete formula and production process of the genetic repair fluid. From that point on, Harano began to study independently, only seeking Orochimaru's guidance when he encountered issues he truly couldn't resolve. After 3 intense months, it was finally completed. Though it was a substitute, and its regenerative abilities were slightly inferior to the original, the difference was minimal. Upon hearing Harano's report, the third Hokage nodded in approval. "How much does it cost to produce a recovery potion now?" he asked. Harano hesitated slightly, then answered, "Well, around 50,000 ryo." 50,000 ryo? The third Hokage raised an eyebrow, surprised at first, then nodded again. "That's certainly more expensive than the standard wound medicine, which costs only a few hundred ryo, but considering its effects, it's worth every penny. Produce a batch for future use." "Yes, sir," Harano replied, bowing. "Then, I'll take my leave." "Go ahead," the Hokage waved him off. Harano nodded, sparing a glance at Orochimaru before exiting. It wasn't until he had left the office that Tsunade and Jiraiya, who had remained silent throughout, snapped back to reality. Both were in shock. Even though they knew Orochimaru had improved the formula, they hadn't expected such astounding results. Orochimaru's scientific research abilities were, to put it mildly, extraordinary. More than anything, the thought that a 10-year-old boy had managed to become someone else's teacher was mind-boggling. Even after they left the Hokage's office, both Tsunade and Jiraiya still hadn't fully recovered from their shock. They had only one thought in mind: how is there such a massive gap between us? Jiraiya, especially, was overwhelmed by a growing sense of inferiority. It seemed like no matter what field they ventured into, he would never be able to surpass Orochimaru. As they walked, Jiraiya couldn't help but glance over at Orochimaru, who was walking calmly beside him. In that moment, it was as if a radiant halo had formed behind Orochimaru's head, shining so brightly that Jiraiya had to avert his gaze. That night, after completing his experiments, Orochimaru returned to his quarters alone, replaying the steps of the cell transplantation process in his mind. Cell transplantation was proving to be far more complicated than he had initially imagined. It required not only cell cultivation but also living organisms as experimental subjects. Since cell cultivation was a lengthy process and Orochimaru wasn't yet in a position to experiment on human subjects, he was currently limited to using mice. For now, his experiments remained in the cell culture phase. As a result, the research projects assigned to him by the system had not seen any significant breakthroughs. Knock, knock, knock. A sudden knock at the door pulled Orochimaru from his thoughts. He frowned but rose to open it. After all, this was Konoha. There weren't any enemies bold enough to approach him here. However, he was still somewhat curious about who would come looking for him at such an hour. When he opened the door, an ANBU stood there, clad in their usual mask and armor. Based on his physique and height, Orochimaru didn't recognize him. "Orochimaru, someone wishes to meet with you," the ANBU said curtly, getting straight to the point. Upon hearing such a direct request, Orochimaru's first thought was of Danzo. But then he reconsidered. Danzo had only recently established the Root organization, and his position wasn't stable enough yet. Orochimaru hadn't even revealed any of his scientific research to him, so it was unlikely that Danzo would reach out at this stage. "Who wants to see me?" Orochimaru asked, a bit wary. The ANBU hesitated for a moment before replying, "Apologies, but I cannot reveal that information. You will know once you arrive." Orochimaru was taken aback. Someone had the authority to summon ANBU but couldn't reveal their identity? Was there another powerful figure in Konoha besides the third Hokage and Danzo? "Very well," Orochimaru said calmly. "Lead the way." Despite his curiosity, Orochimaru didn't feel threatened. In Konoha, no one would dare make a move against him. His value to the village was too high, even the slightest disturbance involving him could trigger a cascade of consequences. Nevertheless, Orochimaru remained on guard as he followed the ANBU through the village. They eventually arrived at a secluded mansion, not far from one of Konoha's secret research facilities, though it was noticeably smaller in scale. As they approached, Orochimaru quietly muttered to himself, 6 guards? HM? What was that? The ANBU, not quite hearing him, glanced back in confusion. It's nothing, Orochimaru replied, masking his surprise. Though the mansion seemed ordinary on the surface, Orochimaru had detected 6 hidden ANBUs stationed around the perimeter. Whoever lived here was clearly someone important. Orochimaru squinted, focusing his perception ability on the person inside the mansion. He immediately sensed a vast amount of chakra. Could it be her? Orochimaru wondered, a flicker of recognition crossing his mind. Curiosity piqued, he followed the ANBU further inside, his mind racing with possibilities. Chapter 49, Orochimaru's perception ability, was something he had only recently begun to study, using the unique characteristics of snakes to detect chakra in his surroundings. Though the range wasn't as extensive as the chakra perception of the canon Orochimaru, the accuracy was still quite remarkable for someone at his level. As such, he was able to sense the figures inside the hut and quickly piece together who they might be. Sure enough, the ANBU opened the door. A middle-aged woman in a white kimono, her hair styled in a double bun, appeared before Orochimaru. Despite being referred to as middle-aged, her appearance was more weathered, with the unmistakable signs of countless years etched into her face. The ANBU, without a word, gestured for Orochimaru to enter. He complied, stepping into the room. The ANBU then silently retreated and closed the door, leaving the two alone. As Orochimaru took in the sight before him, his suspicions were immediately confirmed. The emblem of the Senju clan embroidered on the woman's robe, paired with her vibrant red hair, made her identity unmistakable. "You wanted to see me?" Orochimaru asked, though he already knew the answer. "Yes," the woman replied calmly. "And you are?" Orochimaru feigned uncertainty, though he had already figured out who she was. "Uzumaki Mito," she said, her voice soft but firm. The name Uzumaki Mito carried a weight far beyond its mere 4 syllables. As soon as it was uttered, even the third Hokage, Sarutobi Hirusan, would have to show respect. It was no wonder she wielded such influence and had so many ANBU watching over her. Uzumaki Mito, the current Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, the wife of Senju Hashirama, the god of shinobi, and the true matriarch of the Senju clan. Any one of these titles alone would be enough to shake the shinobi world. Orochimaru was genuinely surprised to be in her presence, but he didn't let that show. Adhering to proper decorum, he adjusted his robes and gave a slight bow. "It is an honor to meet you, Mito-sama." "Please forgive my rudeness," he said, his tone respectful. "Ah, such a polite young man," Mito remarked, her demeanor warm and gentle. There was something about her natural affinity that made her presence feel soothing, like a spring breeze. It was an inherent quality that some people simply possessed. "Please, have a seat," she said, motioning to the chair beside her with a kind smile. Orochimaru nodded and took a seat, his mind already whirling with possibilities about why she had called him here. Though she had lived in Konoha for a long time, someone of her stature rarely made direct contact with others. Why him, of all people? Could it be that she was here on behalf of Tsunade? After all, beyond being the wife of the first Hokage, Uzumaki Mito was also Tsunade's grandmother. If she had sought him out for matters concerning Tsunade, it would make some sense. However, if the issue was related to Tsunade, surely Mito wouldn't need to intervene directly, right? Just as Orochimaru was lost in thought, Mito spoke again, interrupting his mental speculations. "I've heard that you were the one who developed that powerful recovery potion," she said, her voice gentle but inquisitive. Orochimaru snapped out of his reverie and nodded. "Yes, Mito-sama, I was involved in its development." Mito chuckled lightly. "You don't have to be so formal. You're Tsunade's classmate, aren't you? You may call me Grandma Mito, just as she does." Orochimaru hesitated for a moment, internally conflicted. In his 2 lifetimes, he had never experienced the concept of having a grandmother. It felt strange, almost unnatural, to be asked to address someone this way. But after a moment's pause, he relented. "Yes. Grandma Mito, Orochimaru finally managed, though the words felt foreign on his tongue. Mito smiled warmly. Orochimaru, you're a remarkable young man. Despite not coming from a great clan or having any significant family backing, you've become Hirusan's disciple entirely on your own merits. I have high hopes for your future. Orochimaru remained silent, sensing that this conversation was about to delve into deeper waters. Sure enough, Mito paused briefly before continuing. Tsunade speaks highly of you, you know. She often mentions your talent and strength. After meeting you today, I can see that you're even more impressive than the rumors suggest. Her words hung in the air for a moment before she added, I'm sure you're wondering why I've called you here, aren't you? To be honest, yes, Orochimaru replied. I am curious. Mito smiled softly, her demeanor still calm. That's understandable. Anyone would be curious if they were summoned like this without explanation. But don't worry, it's nothing too serious. As I get older, I tend to ramble a bit, so I hope you don't mind. Not at all, Orochimaru said, though he remained on guard. Mito's expression grew thoughtful. I've brought you here today for one reason, really. I wanted to hear your thoughts on the future. My thoughts on the future? Orochimaru asked, puzzled. What exactly do you mean? I'm asking about your ideals, your dreams, Mito clarified, her tone slow and deliberate. She straightened her robes slightly as she spoke, keeping her gaze fixed on Orochimaru. My dreams? Orochimaru repeated, his eyes narrowing slightly. After a moment of contemplation, he replied, I wonder if bringing peace to the shinobi world counts. Peace in the shinobi world? Mito raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by his response. But she didn't dismiss the notion. That's quite a lofty dream. And how do you plan to achieve that? Orochimaru remained composed, though internally he was treading carefully. I haven't fully figured that out yet, he lied, his voice smooth. But I intend to work toward that goal, step by step. In truth, Orochimaru was wary of why Uzumaki Mito had asked him such a question. He felt an instinctive need to be cautious in his responses. Deep down, though, he already had a plan. The unified theory he had mentioned to Tsunade wasn't just idle talk. As a reincarnator who had experienced a world without war, Orochimaru had little patience for the constant fighting that plagued the shinobi world. Endless battles, life constantly hanging in the balance. What was the point of such a world? To him, the fleeting satisfaction of victory in combat could never compare to the peace and pleasures of a stable, unified world. In a time of peace, a person with strength or wealth could live a life full of meaning and color. But this world was different. This world was one of war. Orochimaru knew he couldn't change that, not yet, at least. The only option was to become stronger, powerful enough to shape the world according to his desires. And unifying the shinobi world was one of the few ambitions that truly drove him. Chapter 50, through sheer force and deterrence, Orochimaru believed that all nations could be compelled to compromise, creating an era of peace and prosperity. While this idea might sound far-fetched to some, it was a genuine belief for Orochimaru. He saw it as not just a possibility but a future he could bring into reality. And, as he thought about it more, he realized there were 3 others in the original timeline who shared a similar vision. The first was Danzo. His goal had been the same, to bring order to the chaotic ninja world. However, his strength was insufficient to support his ambition. He hadn't even had the chance to start a concrete plan, let alone achieve success or failure. The second was Nagato, also known as Pain. Nagato aimed to capture the tailed beasts and use them to create the ultimate weapon, the Ten Tails, in order to intimidate the 5 great nations into submission. He had almost succeeded in his endeavor. Yet, in the end, his strength was still lacking, and he was defeated partly due to the protagonist's overwhelming influence and the infamous Talk no Jutsu. The third was Kaguya. She not only thought along these lines but also acted on them, successfully achieving her goal. Kaguya had subdued the entire world under her rule, and if not for the betrayal by her own children when she attempted to use humanity to cultivate the God Tree, the ninja world would still be under her dominion. war would never have broken out. In his past life, Orochimaru had been an ordinary person on Earth, powerless to change his situation. He lived a life of mediocrity, often at the mercy of others, without the means to pursue grand ambitions. But now, things were different. Now, he was Orochimaru, armed with both a system and talent. His circumstances had changed dramatically, and with them, his aspirations had grown exponentially. Of course, these ambitions were far off in the future. For now, they were plans he kept close to his chest, revealing them to no one, not even to Uzumaki Mito. When he had briefly mentioned his vision of unifying the world to Tsunade, it had been more of a whim than a true disclosure. Mito, meanwhile, listened to Orochimaru's words with a gentle smile and nodded approvingly. Talented, hard-working, and with a clear sense of direction. "You're a good child." She chuckled softly. "That girl, Tsunade, was right about you." Orochimaru's eyes narrowed slightly at the mention of Tsunade. Tsunade said something about me? He thought to himself. It seemed the butterfly effect was already starting to unfold. In the original timeline, Tsunade had a favorable opinion of him, but they were not close to the extent where she would speak of him to her family. But now! Mito's gaze softened as she looked at Orochimaru, clearly becoming more and more satisfied with him. She continued their conversation for another 10 minutes, asking about his studies and ambitions, before eventually excusing him, noting that it was late and further discussion could wait for another time. As Orochimaru left, Mito watched him go and nodded slightly. With talent, courage, and determination, Orochimaru, you will become a great ninja one day, she murmured to herself, though unbeknownst to her, she was misjudging the extent of his ambitions. Under the pale moonlight, Orochimaru's mind raced with thoughts about the encounter. It's said that Mito can sense the good and evil within people, just like in the canon. If that's the case, she should also be able to sense lies. He paused in his steps, thinking back to the scene. However, Mito hadn't seemed to use her abilities at that time. After all, in order to perceive good and evil, she would need to enter the Nine-Tails mode, and detecting lies would require intense focus and concentration. Neither of those signs had been present during their conversation. It seemed she didn't expect that a boy, not even 10 years old, would have the audacity to lie to her, Orochimaru mused, a small, confident smirk playing at the corners of his lips. In his mind, the abilities of a ninja could broadly be divided into 3 categories: ninjutsu, taijutsu, and jinjutsu. But when it came to true strength, taijutsu was limited to techniques like the 8 Gates formation. Most other physical skills were hardly worth mentioning. The real power came from mystical techniques, forbidden jutsu, and the abilities derived from bloodline limits. Strength, speed, and the power of ninjutsu. After returning home, Orochimaru lay on his bed, his thoughts spinning rapidly. While the meeting with Mito had been unexpected, it didn't impact his current plans much. What mattered now was increasing his strength. Though he wasn't weak by any means, he knew that his current abilities were still far from enough. I'm half a scientist after all, Orochimaru thought to himself. I can't solely focus on physical strength. The path of raw power or the 8 Gates formation isn't suitable for me. Speed, however, was another matter. What are the fastest techniques? He pondered. The Flying Thunder God technique? The 8 Gates? Or perhaps the lightning release armor used by the ninja of the Hidden Cloud Village? The lightning release armor, much like the 8 Gates, required immense physical strength to support it, so that was out of the question. That left the space-time technique, the Flying Thunder God. Yes, that would be a good option. A space-time jump, teleportation, it's a miraculous technique for both offense and escape. Orochimaru thought back to the Third Great Ninja War, where the 4th Hokage had used the Flying Thunder God technique to earn his legendary reputation. However, in the original timeline, Orochimaru had studied this technique and ultimately decided against learning it. The reason for that decision had never been fully clear, even to him. Could I learn it, though? The bigger issue was that the Flying Thunder God technique, along with many other forbidden jutsu, was locked away in the Scroll of Seals, a record of forbidden techniques passed down in Konoha. The version contained in the scroll was still incomplete. Orochimaru narrowed his eyes. It seems that in addition to the Flying Thunder God technique, the Scroll of Seals also contains the foundation for the Impure World Reincarnation technique that I need, doesn't it? Though the techniques in the scroll were imperfect, they would provide more than enough material for him to study and refine on his own. The real challenge, of course, was that with the second Hokage dead, the third Hokage, Hirusan, would never allow Orochimaru access to the scroll. Forbidden techniques were strictly guarded. So, how do I go about this? Orochimaru mused, deep in thought. After a moment, he had the answer. Danzo. If the original Orochimaru had managed to gain access to these forbidden techniques by working with Danzo, then there was no reason he couldn't follow the same path. The more he thought about it, the more it made sense. All I have to do is manipulate Danzo into trusting me. Once I've gained his confidence, I can easily get my hands on the Scroll of Seals. Not only that, but once he gained access to the scroll, he could also obtain the cells of the first Hokage for his experiments. With a satisfied smile, Orochimaru nodded to himself, already planning his next steps. Chapter 51. Early the next morning, Orochimaru, fully equipped and prepared, made his way to the Hokage's office. As the newly appointed leader of his team, he was now responsible for taking on missions on behalf of his squad. Being disciples of Hirusan, the three of them, Orochimaru, Tsunade, and Jiraiya, had a lot of leeway when it came to missions. Their missions weren't mandatory. Orochimaru and his team would first be asked if they were available. If they wanted to take the mission, they could. If not, there was no pressure. In essence, their participation in missions was dependent on their own mood and availability. The reasons were clear. First, they were the Hokage's disciples, so naturally, they were given preferential treatment. But secondly, and more importantly, Orochimaru wasn't just any ninja, he was also one of the key researchers in Konoha's scientific development efforts. Konoha had many skilled ninja, but not many could contribute to scientific research like Orochimaru. So, the village gave him freedom in mission choices to allow him to focus on more important projects. Because of this, Jiraiya and Tsunade also benefited from this leniency, following Orochimaru's lead in choosing tasks. When Orochimaru entered the office, Hirusan looked a bit surprised to see him. "You've just been appointed captain, and already you're eager to get started on missions?" Sarutobi asked, raising an eyebrow. "I'm tired of staying in the village and want to go out for a bit," Orochimaru replied casually. Although Orochimaru had a clear training plan, progress was slow. He knew that he was still too young to fully execute his long-term goals. If he wanted to win Danzo's trust and delve deeper into more controversial experiments, he needed to first master advanced techniques like cell transplantation. However, his research on cultivating cells was still in the early stages, and it would take time before any real progress was made. In the meantime, Orochimaru figured it would be good to familiarize himself with the world outside Konoha. Hearing this, Hirusan chuckled softly. "It's true. What you need most now is real-world training. So, what kind of mission would you like to take on?" See? This was the treatment a Hokage's disciple received. Not only could they choose their missions, they were even asked what type of mission they preferred. "The mission level should be as high as possible," Orochimaru said in a calm tone. Although the three of them were still officially Chunin, their strength had far surpassed that rank. While they weren't yet ready for S-rank missions, B-rank missions were well within their capabilities. Hirusan nodded thoughtfully. He knew his three students were progressing quickly, and giving them more advanced missions was the logical next step. However, as their teacher, he still had to consider their safety. After some deliberation, Hirusan selected a relatively safe yet challenging B-rank mission, escorting a caravan to the land of rice fields. The journey might involve some danger, but the enemies they'd encounter were unlikely to exceed Chunin level. This mission would give them some real-world experience without posing excessive risk. Orochimaru accepted the mission scroll, but before he could leave, the door burst open, and Jiraiya came charging in. "Orochimaru! Orochimaru! Did you get an S-rank mission?" "Did you?" Jiraiya shouted excitedly, practically bouncing with enthusiasm. Behind him, Tsunade followed, her face covered with exasperated black lines. Tsunade sighed and shook her head, pointing at Jiraiya as she spoke. I told him no, but he insisted on coming anyway. Now he's convinced we're about to take on an S-rank mission. S-rank? Ha ha ha. Hirusan couldn't help but laugh. Jiraiya, Genin aren't allowed to accept S-rank missions. Seriously? Jiraiya groaned in frustration. All these missions lately have been so boring. Can't we take on something more exciting? Despite being repeatedly knocked down in both training and life, Jiraiya's enthusiasm never seemed to wane. He was always ready for the next challenge. Orochimaru raised the mission scroll in his hand and said, "There's no S-rank mission, but we did get a B-rank mission. Let's go." B-rank? Jiraiya froze for a moment, then broke out into a wide grin. That's awesome. B-rank missions are usually reserved for Chunin. We're finally getting some real action. For a Genin to be assigned a B-rank mission without a Jonin guide was rare. This alone proved that the third Hokage recognized the strength and potential of his students. Of course, it also helped that they were Hokage's disciples. Ignoring Jiraiya's excited babbling, Orochimaru turned on his heel and headed for the door, clutching the mission scroll. Their mission was simple: head south of Konoha, where a caravan awaited their escort to the land of rice fields. As they left the Hokage's office and passed by the training grounds, Jiraiya suddenly stopped and pointed, shouting, "Orochimaru! Tsunade! Look over there!" Curious, Orochimaru and Tsunade followed Jiraiya's gaze to see a group of boys, about their age, sparring. But one of the boys stood out, a white-haired boy wielding a short sword. He was incredibly skilled, effortlessly holding his ground against 3 opponents at once. That guy, he's really strong, Tsunade exclaimed, her eyes wide with surprise. Tsunade was a fierce fighter herself, and aside from Orochimaru, she had rarely encountered an opponent who could match her strength. But this boy was something else entirely. He was fighting 3-on-1, and from the looks of it, he wasn't even breaking a sweat. She glanced sideways at Orochimaru, wondering if even he could handle 3 opponents with such ease. Hataki Sakumo, Orochimaru murmured, narrowing his eyes as he watched the boy. I almost forgot about him. Chapter 52, the father of Kakashi Hataki, the famous White Fang of Konoha, stood among his peers, wielding his short sword with incredible precision. Even at this young age, Hataki Sakumo was showing signs of the immense power and skill that would one day earn him a place alongside the Sannin in terms of strength and reputation. Sakumo, being 1 year older than the Sannin, was already demonstrating the abilities that would soon make him a household name. As he sparred with 3 others, he moved with such speed that he hardly gave his opponents any time to react, let alone form hand seals. What incredible speed! This guy might even be on par with Orochimaru, Jiraiya muttered to himself as he watched, clearly impressed. The technique Sakumo was using was an advanced body flicker technique, one of the highest forms of taijutsu that allowed for near-instantaneous movement. There were many variations of teleportation techniques, ranging from Flying Thunder God, the fastest space-time technique, to basic body flicker techniques, to those that used elemental chakra to achieve high-speed movement. Right now, Orochimaru, Tsunade, and Hataki Sakumo were all using a standard body flicker technique, which allowed them to burst forward at incredible speeds by focusing chakra into their legs. This type of movement wasn't continuous, as it required a large amount of chakra control, making it difficult to use repeatedly. However, when executed correctly, it was devastating in close-range combat, as the ninja appeared to vanish and reappear in an instant. Most ninja could perform some variation of the body flicker, but the speed and precision of the technique varied greatly depending on the user's chakra control and physical condition. As a rule of thumb, Jonin were naturally faster than Genin, due to their superior chakra control and experience. Orochimaru, having enhanced his body through his genetic enhancement and the awakening of the Sharingan, had become as fast as a Jonin, despite being a Genin by rank. What surprised him was that Hataki Sakumo, without any apparent modifications or enhancements, was already using the body flicker technique at a level comparable to his own. This guy is really strong. But, Orochimaru said under his breath. However, he trailed off, leaving his next thought unsaid. Jiraiya, sensing Orochimaru's hesitation, chimed in, "But what? Are you jealous? Do you want to go up there and fight him? Go ahead. Jiraiya-sama, will be cheering you on." Orochimaru shook his head. "I'm not that bored. We have a mission to focus on." Without waiting for a response, Orochimaru turned and began walking away, leaving both Jiraiya and Tsunade behind. Jiraiya, bewildered, shouted after him, "Hey! Don't just leave like that." As he watched Orochimaru leave without engaging Sakumo, Jiraiya was left utterly confused. In his mind, geniuses like Orochimaru should naturally want to challenge other geniuses. Where was the competitive spirit? Where was the legendary ninja pride? Why doesn't Orochimaru play by the usual rules? Jiraiya thought, frustration creeping in. Geniuses are supposed to be itching for a fight with each other, right? As all these questions swirled in Jiraiya's head, Tsunade stood silently beside him, observing Orochimaru as he walked away. It wasn't clear what was going through her mind, but she seemed to be deep in thought. Later, the team arrived at a small courtyard in the south of Konoha village, where they met their client, a large, round man named Bach, a wealthy merchant known for traveling the world and doing business in many countries. This time, he had come to Konoha to sell rare medicinal herbs he had acquired from the Land of Waves, and he needed a team of ninja to escort him safely to the Land of Rice Fields. As soon as Bach saw Orochimaru and his team, however, his face twisted in anger. "What's going on here?" Bach shouted, glaring at the Konoha ninja who had brought the Genin team to him. "I came here to hire ninja, and I'm willing to pay a good price. And yet, you send me these three brats to protect me?" The Konoha ninja bowed apologetically. "I'm very sorry, but the village carefully selects the teams for each mission. The fact that these three were sent means that they are more than capable of handling the task." "Capable?" Bach roared, his face red with frustration. "They're children. I could take on 3 of them myself. Stop joking around and send me real ninja. This is a B-rank mission, there should be at least 1 Chunin in the group." Bach crossed his arms, waiting for an explanation, while Orochimaru, Jiraiya, and Tsunade stood quietly to the side. Though his complaints were understandable, it was obvious he was underestimating the 3 young ninja. "I understand your concerns," the Konoha ninja continued. "But these 3 are not ordinary Genin. They are the personal disciples of the 3rd Hokage, and their abilities are far beyond what their rank might suggest." "Hokage's disciples?" Bach asked, his skepticism giving way to curiosity. "Of course," Tsunade said confidently, stepping forward. "We're more than qualified to handle this mission. Trust me, Chunin would be no match for us." Bach squinted, still unsure, but clearly more interested now. "You're really the Hokage's students?" "Absolutely," Jiraiya chimed in with his usual bravado. "With us on the job, not only will we complete this B-rank mission, we could handle an S-rank mission if needed." Orochimaru glanced at Jiraiya, clearly uninterested in engaging in his friend's antics. He could understand Bach's hesitation. To the untrained eye, they were just kids, and the world outside the village was full of dangerous, experienced enemies. However, their training had more than prepared them for the task at hand. Still, Bach wasn't convinced so easily. "I've heard a lot of promises from ninjas before, but when push comes to shove, it's my life that's on the line." Orochimaru, sensing that Bach needed further reassurance, spoke up. "You're concerned about wandering ninjas, right? We've dealt with them before. You'll be safe under our protection." The merchant still looked conflicted, but he knew the reputation of the Hokage's disciples. With a reluctant sigh, he nodded. "All right. But if anything goes wrong, I'm holding your village responsible." Chapter 53, Bach led Orochimaru and the team to a small town just outside Konoha village, where the caravan of goods was waiting. There were 4 or 5 large carts loaded with various goods, and accompanying them were several hired hands and 5 or 6 warriors tasked with guarding the goods. These warriors were Bach's personal guards, responsible for his safety during his travels. Orochimaru quickly assessed the situation and could tell that the warriors weren't anything special. They were ordinary samurai, clearly lacking the ability to wield chakra. In this world, there were 2 types of samurai, those who could use chakra and those who couldn't. A samurai capable of using chakra was exponentially stronger than one who couldn't, and these men in front of him were definitely the latter. Facing such a low-level challenge, Orochimaru had no interest in involving himself. It was far beneath him. However, Jiraiya was a different story. His excitement was palpable, and the prospect of showing off his strength seemed to energize him. With Bach watching in surprise, Jiraiya single-handedly took on all 6 warriors. His sheer enthusiasm and reckless bravado were enough to carry him through the skirmish. In no time, the guards were lying on the ground, defeated and humiliated, while Jiraiya stood over them with a proud grin plastered across his face. "How was that, huh? Didn't I tell you, uncle? I wasn't exaggerating." Jiraiya boasted, arms crossed, his chest puffed out in pride. It was clear he was reveling in the moment. Bach, who had been skeptical of the young ninja earlier, nodded rapidly, his doubt turning to astonishment. "Incredible. I never would have believed it. Such power at such a young age. Truly deserving of being Hokage's disciples." Bach's amazement only grew as he looked at his defeated guards, who had been beaten so decisively. Now, with his fears eased, he fully accepted that the mission was in good hands. Jiraiya, meanwhile, was basking in the praise, completely oblivious to the fact that Orochimaru remained unimpressed. Orochimaru had already shifted his attention to the mission scroll, checking their destination, the land of rice fields. The land of rice fields was a place that held special significance in Orochimaru's mind. In the original timeline, it was the very place where he would eventually establish the Sound Village, his personal stronghold after defecting from Konoha. Reflecting on his past life, Orochimaru couldn't help but wonder how his fate would unfold now that everything had changed. In the original story, he had gone down a dark path, leading him to join and then betray the Akatsuki, ultimately forming his own village of rogue ninja. But now, with his current knowledge and new circumstances, he wasn't sure what the future held. Still, Orochimaru wasn't one to dwell on what-ifs. There would be time to decide his fate later. For now, the only thing that mattered was the task at hand. With Bach now fully on board, the team finally set off toward the land of rice fields. Traveling from Konoha village to their destination would take about 3 days if they were moving at full ninja speed. However, given the presence of the caravan and ordinary civilians in the group, the journey would take twice as long, around 10 days to 2 weeks. Meanwhile, back in Konoha, the village was buzzing with excitement over a new development. Rumors had started to spread among the villagers and ninja alike. "Hey, have you heard the news?" one shinobi asked another as they walked through the streets of Konoha. "Heard what?" his friend replied. "They say the village has developed a new type of recovery potion." "Recovery potion? You mean like the blood-increasing pills?" No, it's something completely different." "Then, is it for restoring chakra?" "Chakra pills, maybe?" "No, it's not for chakra. It's for healing injuries and fast, too." "Healing injuries? Come on, that sounds too good to be true," his friend said skeptically. "I'm telling you, it's the real deal. Word is, it heals wounds in under 3 minutes. As long as you're not injured in the brain or heart, you'll recover almost instantly." 3 minutes? That's impossible. You're messing with me. "I swear, it's true. You'll see in a couple of days when they make the official announcement." As these conversations took place in the streets, many villagers remained skeptical. The idea of a potion that could heal severe wounds in just a few minutes sounded like an exaggeration too good to be real. But while the rumors spread, most people didn't fully believe it until the village authorities themselves made an official announcement 5 days later. When the announcement finally came, it sent shockwaves throughout Konoha. From the highest ranks of the ninja to the lowest, the news spread like wildfire. The village has developed a new type of recovery potion capable of quickly healing severe injuries. If needed, you can purchase it at Konoha Hospital. Each team captain received the same orders and passed them down to their respective teams. As soon as the announcement was made, Konoha erupted into excitement. "No way. Is this for real?" one ninja asked, wide-eyed. "It's unbelievable. I have to get my hands on one of those potions." "I'm going too. I don't care what it costs." "What? 60,000 Ryo per dose? That's outrageous." "Outrageous or not, I'm buying it. A potion that can heal in minutes is worth every penny." Despite the steep price of 60,000 Ryo per dose, demand for the new recovery potion was through the roof. In a world where missions were life and death matters, having access to a potion that could quickly heal life-threatening injuries was nothing short of revolutionary. For many ninja, the cost didn't matter. Being able to recover from serious wounds in the middle of battle was a game-changer. In just a few days, Konoha went from skepticism to outright frenzy. The new recovery potion was the talk of the village, and every ninja in Konoha was scrambling to get their hands on it. This breakthrough wasn't just a victory for Konoha's medical researchers, it was a monumental leap in the village's military capabilities. Having this potion available on the battlefield would give Konoha's shinobi a massive edge in future conflicts. The entire village was brimming with excitement, and the effects of this development would soon ripple across the entire ninja world. Chapter 54. Once you're in that critical state during a battle, death is almost certain. But with this new recovery potion, combined with the blood-increasing pills, the tides of battle could shift dramatically. As long as you're not fatally wounded, and can buy a few precious minutes, the combination of both can essentially bring you back to full strength. In a way, it's as if this potion gives you half an extra life. So, even if it costs 60,000 Ryo, or even 600,000 Ryo, it would be worth saving up for a spare dose. After all, when your life is on the line, no price is too high for a chance to stay alive. Of course, most of the ninja in Konoha have undergone psychological training and are loyal to the village. They trust that the village wouldn't deceive them about the potion's effectiveness. Still, there were some skeptics. The claims about the potion's speed and power seemed almost too good to be true, and while some were eager to believe, others took a more cautious, neutral stance, neither buying it immediately nor outright dismissing the rumors. However, their doubts wouldn't last for long. At Konoha Hospital, there were plenty of injured ninja who served as perfect test cases for the new potion. Under the watchful eyes of everyone, the potion was administered in front of a large audience. The results were nothing short of astonishing. Within 3 minutes, the potion began to take effect. Wounds started closing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Although it couldn't regenerate severed limbs, ordinary injuries and trauma healed rapidly. Once the price of the potion was revealed, 50,000 Ryo to make, but sold for only 60,000 Ryo, ninja flocked to the hospital in droves, eager to get their hands on it. A long line quickly formed outside the hospital, filled with eager shinobi waiting to purchase a dose. Harano and his team of researchers worked around the clock, preparing the first batch of recovery potions. After 5 days and nights of tireless work, the first batch was completed. However, it was far smaller than expected, only 50 doses. Despite the limited supply, every vial was sold out almost immediately. "Unbelievable," one of the shinobi exclaimed, looking at the results. "Ha ha ha, Harano-sensei, you've really outdone yourself," another ninja praised. Harano, though flattered, felt a bit uncomfortable with the praise. In truth, he wasn't the one who deserved the credit. Orochimaru was the true mastermind behind the development of the potion. But Hirusan had decreed that Orochimaru's role in the village's scientific advancements was to remain a closely guarded secret. The village wasn't ready to reveal Orochimaru's work to the public, so only a few select individuals like Tsunade, Jiraiya, and a handful of high-ranking shinobi knew the truth. Those who knew had signed confidentiality agreements and were sworn to silence. For now, Harano had to bear the weight of the credit and the attention that came with it. After fending off the wave of compliments, Harano left the hospital and made his way to the Hokage's office to deliver a report. Hirusan sat at his desk, listening carefully as Harano presented the findings. And that's the situation, Hokage-sama, Harano concluded. Based on the amount of medicinal herbs we've acquired, the maximum number of recovery potions we can produce is about 500. Any more than that, and we'll run out of rare ingredients. Hirusan nodded thoughtfully. 500. It's a good start, but it's not enough. Take your time with the next batch. You've done well, Harano. Go get some rest. Thank you, Hokage-sama, Harano said, bowing as he left the room. As soon as Harano left, Hirusan summoned the other high-ranking officials of Konoha, including Hamura Mitokado, Koharu Udatane, and Danzo Shimura. When they heard the report, both Hamura and Koharu were full of praise. This is a tremendous scientific achievement, Hamura said, eyes gleaming. Orochimaru really is a genius, Koharu added. This potion will be like carrying a medical ninja with you into battle. It'll drastically reduce casualties for our shinobi. Indeed, Danzo said coolly. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. While the potion is effective, it still has its limits. If the injuries are too severe or too numerous, one dose may not be enough. They've tested that already, Koharu replied. If someone takes 2 doses, it should be enough to heal even the most serious wounds. Danzo narrowed his eyes, remaining silent for a moment. Even he couldn't find any flaws in the recovery potion's design, and that was a rare occurrence. Meanwhile, far from Konoha, Orochimaru was unaware of the potion's sudden popularity in the village. His team had finally reached the border of the land of rice fields, and they were taking a brief rest before crossing into the small country. While Jiraiya chatted away with the merchant Bak, Orochimaru sat by himself on a large rock, lost in thought. The land of rice fields bordered the land of fire to the north and was a small, neutral country wedged between the larger nations. With no ninja village of its own, the land of rice fields had always been a victim of the conflicts between the great powers, often caught in the crossfire. Orochimaru knew this all too well. During Konoha's wars with Kumo, the land of rice fields had suffered greatly. As Orochimaru reflected on the country's fate, an idea began to form in his mind. Regardless of whether his future played out as it had in the original timeline, he knew one thing for certain: if he wanted to achieve true power, he would need to build his own force. In the original series, Orochimaru had formed the Sound Village, gathering an elite group of subordinates like Kabuto, Kimimaro, Yugo, and Guren. Each one of them was powerful in their own right. Orochimaru realized that if he didn't start building his own team, he would end up doing everything himself. That would be no different from living as a mediocre ninja. Even Danzo knew the importance of gathering a loyal team before trying to accomplish anything significant. There was no reason for Orochimaru to be any different. As he thought about this, Orochimaru's expression grew serious. It's time to start preparing for the future, he muttered to himself. Just then, a voice interrupted his thoughts. Hey, Orochimaru, what are you thinking about? Tsunade asked, walking over to him. She had noticed him sitting off to the side, deep in thought. Orochimaru glanced at her, his mind still partially on his plans. Nothing much, he replied. Tsunade gave him a suspicious look. Really? You've seemed distracted this whole trip. Is it because of what Grandma Mito told you? Not at all, Orochimaru answered, pausing as something clicked in his mind. Wait, how do you know your grandmother came to see me? Tsunade's eyes widened slightly as she realized she'd said too much. She bit her lip, quickly trying to cover up her slip. Well, because she told me she was going to talk to you. Orochimaru raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. He had already guessed as much. Tsunade, relieved that Orochimaru didn't pry, smiled awkwardly and decided to change the subject. Hee, speaking of which, what do you think about me being your girlfriend? She asked suddenly, trying to be playful but also somewhat serious. Orochimaru blinked, taken aback by the question. What? Tsunade's face turned slightly pink, but she maintained her composure, waiting for his response. For a moment, Orochimaru didn't know what to say. It seemed like Tsunade was half joking, but he also knew her well enough to realize she might not be entirely kidding. He couldn't help but chuckle softly to himself. Tsunade was many things, but subtle was not one of them. Chapter 55. Looking at Tsunade's cute yet serious expression, Orochimaru couldn't help but feel amused and somewhat infected by her earnestness. It was hard to take her seriously, yet her straightforwardness was strangely endearing. "Didn't I tell you? Wait until you've grown up," Orochimaru replied with a small smile, hoping that would end the conversation. "But, I want to be your girlfriend now." Tsunade pouted, clearly not satisfied with his response. Orochimaru sighed. "Do you even know what it means to be a girlfriend?" Tsunade's face lit up with determination, but then she stopped, and a mischievous glint appeared in her eyes as she leaned closer. "Of course I do, but wait a minute. Hey! You're not like that big pervert Jiraiya, are you? Don't tell me you're rejecting me because you don't like my flat chest." Orochimaru blinked in surprise. Even though he had grown used to Tsunade's blunt nature, her comment caught him off guard. For a moment, he was at a loss for words. It was one thing to be straightforward, but this was a bit much. He glanced at her. She was still a child, almost 10 years old, with no signs of the physical development that would one day make her famous. Compared to other girls her age, she was indeed a bit behind. But Orochimaru, who knew the future, also knew that Tsunade's appearance would change drastically as she matured. In time, no one would dare to criticize her or even compete with her in this regard. "You're thinking too much," Orochimaru replied dryly, attempting to steer the conversation back to normalcy. Tsunade's expression immediately brightened. "I knew you weren't as shallow as Jiraiya. So, it's settled then, right?" Without waiting for him to respond, she happily took his arm, as if they had just sealed some grand agreement. Orochimaru could clearly feel the strength she exerted, even in this small gesture. She was stronger than any 10-year-old girl had a right to be. Orochimaru couldn't help but feel a mixture of emotions, amusement, guilt, and a strange sense of contentment. Here was Tsunade, who had so casually confessed her feelings, without hesitation or fear of rejection. Tsunade had always been direct, even as a child. Orochimaru could tell that much hadn't changed in the future. Although she was still young, her boldness took him off guard. He didn't give her a straight answer, but he also didn't push her away. In the distance, Jiraiya watched the entire exchange unfold. His eyes burned with resentment, and his heart sank deeper with every second that Tsunade clung to Orochimaru. Cursing Orochimaru under his breath, he couldn't help but feel that his hopes of being with Tsunade were crumbling before his eyes. "It's really unfair," Jiraiya muttered, supporting his chin with his hand. The scene before him was crushing. Tsunade, who had always been the object of his affection, had never shown the slightest interest in him, and now she was practically glued to Orochimaru's side. It felt like his entire motivation for training had been ripped away in an instant. What was the point of improving if he had no hope with her? From across the campfire, Bak, the merchant, noticed Jiraiya's gloomy expression. As someone with a bit more life experience, Bak immediately recognized the telltale signs of a love triangle. "What's wrong, kid?" Bak asked, leaning forward with a sly smile. "You look like someone who just lost a fight, or maybe something even more important." Jiraiya snapped out of his daze, shaking his head. "Nah. It's nothing, really. Just feeling a little off." Bak chuckled, clearly not fooled. "Looks to me like your buddy over there is winning something you wanted. But come on, you can't give up so easily, can you?" Jiraiya sighed, dejected. "What's the point? I can never beat Orochimaru. I've tried, and I always lose." He rested his head in his hands. "What am I supposed to do when I'm constantly coming in second to that guy?" Jiraiya's despondency wasn't just because of Tsunade. It was the fact that Orochimaru had always been ahead of him, in strength, in talent, in every way that mattered. It was a tough pill to swallow. Bak raised an eyebrow, genuinely surprised. You can't beat him at all? Even with all your skills? He must be quite something. Yeah, he's something all right, Jiraiya mumbled bitterly. No matter how hard I train, no matter how much stronger I get, Orochimaru is always 2 steps ahead. It's exhausting. Bach gave Jiraiya a thoughtful look, then leaned in. Well, just because you haven't beaten him yet doesn't mean you won't be able to one day. You're a ninja, right? You're supposed to be persistent. Giving up after a few losses? Come on, kid, that's not the ninja way. Jiraiya stared at Bach, his eyes widening as the merchant's words began to sink in. Slowly, he nodded. You know what? You're right, uncle. Just because I haven't beaten him now doesn't mean I won't in the future. I'm a ninja. I can't give up that easily. Bach grinned, clearly satisfied that his words had had the desired effect. Exactly. That's the spirit. Keep at it. You'll get your chance. Thanks, uncle. You really helped me snap out of it. Jiraiya said with newfound energy, a grin spreading across his face. As Jiraiya continued to chat with Bach, Tsunade, who had been watching from a distance, couldn't help but raise an eyebrow. What's going on with Jiraiya? She asked, glancing at Orochimaru. Orochimaru, still somewhat amused by the earlier conversation, glanced over at Jiraiya. Who knows? Maybe he just needed some motivation. Tsunade rolled her eyes, looking down at her hand still wrapped around Orochimaru's arm. What does it have to do with him if I'm holding your arm? Besides, does he look unhappy to you? Orochimaru followed her gaze and noticed Jiraiya, who was now grinning and full of energy once more. Strange. Orochimaru muttered. Looks like he snapped out of it on his own. Tsunade shrugged, resting her head on Orochimaru's shoulder. Whatever. It's not like he ever had a chance anyway. Chapter 56. I have to say, Jiraiya's willpower is really something else. Much like Naruto in the future, Jiraiya possesses a resilient and indomitable spirit. Even when he's down in the dumps, he always manages to bounce back, lifting himself up with his sheer determination. Maybe that's why so many people in the future end up admiring him. He's positive, optimistic, and full of a kind of energy that never fades. After resting for a bit, the group resumed their journey towards the land of rice fields. The mission went off without any real trouble. Aside from encountering a few small-time bandits and a group of wandering ninjas, there were no significant threats. When it came to the bandits, Orochimaru didn't even need to lift a finger. Jiraiya and Tsunade took care of everything swiftly. The only real confrontation worth mentioning was with the wandering ninja group, a team made up of 1 Chunin and 3 Genin. However, they were no match for the strength of Orochimaru's team. The battle was over before it even began. During that fight, Orochimaru noticed something strange about himself, a growing sense of ruthlessness. He had no desire to let his enemies live. The moment the Chunin engaged him, he killed the man in an instant. If it weren't for Tsunade and Jiraiya stopping him, the 3 Genin would have likely faced the same fate, without the chance to flee. Orochimaru didn't reflect on this too deeply. To him, it was the natural course of things. In this world, you either survived or you didn't, and his growing instinct to eliminate threats seemed logical, perhaps even necessary. The mission, a B rank, had a payout of 150,000 Ryo. Despite its difficulty being on the higher side of B rank, the commission was the maximum amount for that rank. However, this mission had stretched out for a full 18 days, and when Orochimaru thought about it, making money as a ninja was no easy task. Ninjas, despite their immense power and the dangerous work they undertook, were still essentially highly paid mercenaries. The 150,000 Ryo had to be split among the village, the team, and the individual members. After all the deductions, there wasn't much left. That said, the mission wasn't without its personal rewards. After completing their escort, Orochimaru took a couple of days to investigate the land of rice fields. He concluded that this small nation lacked any ninja villages and was sparsely populated. Even the daimyo's residence was unimpressive. It wasn't grand or opulent, just a bit more spacious than the average home. It wasn't hard to see why Orochimaru had chosen this place to establish his base in the original timeline. The daimyo of such a small country would be easily bribed, and without a powerful political structure or a significant population, it was the perfect place to establish a hidden village without drawing much attention. By the time Orochimaru and his team returned to Konoha, 18 days had passed. As they entered the village gates, they overheard two gatekeepers talking. The recovery power of this new potion is unreal. Did you hear about how Rukawa survived his mission thanks to it? Really? That's incredible. Yeah, I've got to say, it's been a game changer for a lot of missions. No kidding. I ordered one for myself after hearing all the hype. I wasn't sure it'd live up to it, but now I'm convinced. You didn't believe the rumors? You didn't see the demonstration by Harano at the hospital? No, I had something else going on that day. Ah, makes sense. As they continued walking, Tsunade and Jiraiya exchanged a glance, both turning their eyes to Orochimaru. Orochimaru, this recovery potion you developed. It's really making waves, Tsunade remarked, impressed. But with something like this, won't that make medical ninjutsu obsolete? Tsunade's expression turned thoughtful, almost worried. When she first started studying medical ninjutsu, her goal had been to reduce the casualties of her comrades in battle, to save lives. But with Orochimaru's potion being so effective at healing wounds, what use would there be for her medical skills? Was her chosen path becoming pointless? Orochimaru, sensing her concern, responded calmly, "It's not quite like that. The potion is expensive, not everyone can afford it. And many of the ingredients are rare, so there's a limit to how much we can produce. Even if you have the money, it doesn't mean there will always be stock. But more importantly, the potion doesn't deal with poisons or complex injuries that require more than just healing." Poisons, Tsunade repeated, her tension easing. So it can't detoxify or deal with diseases? Orochimaru nodded. Exactly. Medical ninjas are still essential. You can treat a far wider variety of conditions than the potion can. And besides, there's always a need for personalized care. Tsunade's shoulders visibly relaxed, a smile crossing her face. Good. For a moment there, I thought my skills were becoming useless. She was right to be relieved. Medical ninjutsu, after all, went beyond just healing cuts and bruises. Medical ninjas were lifesavers in a wide array of scenarios, from curing diseases to handling life-threatening injuries and poisons. By the way, Orochimaru, since this potion is so rare, do you carry a spare? Tsunade asked, her curiosity piqued. Orochimaru smirked, pulling out a scroll. Of course. With a puff of smoke, 2 bottles appeared in his hand. Here, one for each of you. Let's hope you won't need them. Hee, thanks. Tsunade said, not wasting any time taking one for herself. She figured there was no need to be modest after all, she was already considering herself Orochimaru's girlfriend, so there was nothing wrong with accepting a gift from him. Jiraiya, however, turned his head away, crossing his arms with a huff. Heh! Jiraiya-sama doesn't need such things. I'm strong enough without a potion. He stood there, expecting Orochimaru to tease him, maybe argue with him a little. But instead, there was silence. After a moment, Jiraiya turned around, confused. To his surprise, Orochimaru had already walked away, leaving him standing there. Wait! Orochimaru. Aren't you going to say something? Jiraiya called out, but Orochimaru didn't even look back. Tsunade, meanwhile, burst into uncontrollable laughter. Ha ha. Oh Jiraiya, why do you always do this to yourself? Take the potion already. Realizing he had missed his chance to impress anyone, Jiraiya sulked and glanced at the potions in Tsunade's hand. He finally figured it out. Orochimaru had given both potions to Tsunade without hesitation, leaving Jiraiya out in the cold. Well, he didn't even offer it to me directly. Jiraiya muttered, scratching his head in defeat. As he stared at Orochimaru walking further away, he realized that maybe Orochimaru wasn't so bad after all. Despite everything, his friend still looked out for him in his own way. "Hey, Orochimaru, wait up!" Jiraiya called out, running to catch up, potion in hand. Chapter 57, Orochimaru took Tsunade and Jiraiya back to the Hokage's office to report on their mission. After collecting their commissions, the three of them parted ways and headed to their respective homes. Orochimaru, exhausted from the long mission, planned to rest as soon as he got back. He had just laid down, closing his eyes for a moment of peace, when Tsunade burst into his room, her excitement palpable. Before he could even ask what was going on, Tsunade, who proudly called herself his girlfriend, dragged him out of the house with a gleeful smile. Still confused, Orochimaru followed Tsunade, wondering what had gotten her so excited. It wasn't until they arrived at Konoha Hospital that he began to piece it together. In the hospital's intensive care unit, Orochimaru was introduced to a new scene. A woman with long, dark green hair lay peacefully on a hospital bed. Her features and the calm expression on her face reminded him of what an adult Tsunade might look like. By her side sat a man, also with dark green hair, wearing a gentle smile. These were Tsunade's parents, a couple Orochimaru vaguely remembered seeing at the second Hokage's funeral. Tsunade's father's hair color stood out. It didn't match the typical Senju black hair of Hashirama or Tobirama. Orochimaru couldn't quite tell how pure the man's Senju bloodline was, but he put the thought aside. Seeing Tsunade walk in holding Orochimaru's hand, her father gave a knowing smile, though there was a hint of helplessness behind it. Clearly, Tsunade had spoken about Orochimaru before, but her father wasn't one to intervene in such matters. Tsunade, aware of how direct Orochimaru could be, introduced him to her parents with a quick nod and then hurried him over to the corner of the room. "Orochimaru, come here!" Tsunade called him excitedly. In the corner of the room, a small bed held a newborn baby. Orochimaru peered over, seeing a tiny figure wrapped in blankets, sleeping soundly. "Look, Orochimaru!" Tsunade exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with joy. "This is my little brother. His name is Navaki. He was born just a few days ago." Orochimaru's eyes softened as he looked at the baby. So, Navaki, the younger brother Tsunade would later care for deeply, had finally been born. "Isn't he adorable?" Tsunade grinned, clearly thrilled to show off her newborn brother. Orochimaru nodded slowly, offering a small smile. "Yeah, he's cute." In truth, Orochimaru didn't particularly care for babies. He wasn't someone who felt a special affection for children. Still, seeing Tsunade this happy made him play along. After all, this was Tsunade's family. Tsunade, however, was too caught up in her joy to notice Orochimaru's lukewarm response. Seeing him agree, she smiled even wider and continued to fawn over little Navaki. Meanwhile, back at the hospital reception, a conversation was unfolding between a white-haired boy and the hospital staff. "Is there any way I can buy one of those new recovery potions? My friend is badly injured," the boy pleaded, his desperation clear. "I'm sorry, but they've all been sold out. The production process is complicated, so only about 10 can be made per day. Right now, the soonest you can reserve one is in 2 weeks." 2 weeks? My friend needs it now. The boy's voice was filled with frustration and panic. "Isn't there any other way?" The hospital staff shook their heads sympathetically. "I'm sorry, but these potions are in high demand. Most of the people who buy them are using them to treat severe injuries. You could try reserving one, but it won't be available for a while." The white-haired boy sighed in defeat. Hataki Sakumo had hoped to save his injured companion, but it seemed like the potion wouldn't be available in time. Shoulders slumped, he turned away from the counter, walking toward the hospital exit. Before he could leave, though, a voice stopped him in his tracks. "You need a recovery potion?" Sakumo turned to see a pale-skinned boy around his age, dressed in ninja gear, with golden vertical pupils. The boy was looking at him curiously. "Why yeah," Sakumo stammered. "My friend's been seriously hurt, and I thought that potion would help. But I guess it's sold out everywhere." Without saying a word, the pale boy reached into his robe and pulled out a vial of the recovery potion. He handed it to Sakumo with an air of nonchalance. "Here, take this." Sakumo's eyes widened. "Wait, what? Why are you? You need it more than I do. Just take it." Sakumo stood there, stunned, before quickly fumbling for his wallet. "I can't just take it for free. Here's 60,000 Ryo." The boy waved him off. "Keep your money. I don't need it right now. Just make sure your friend gets better." Before Sakumo could argue further, the boy turned and walked away. "Wait!" Sakumo called after him, chasing him down the hallway. "Why did you give this to me?" "I told you, I don't need it," the boy replied, not slowing down. "But still, I can't take it for nothing. Here, please, take the money." Sakumo shoved the Ryo into the boy's hand. "My name's Hataki Sakumo. What's yours?" The pale boy paused, glancing at the money before pocketing it with a small smile. "Orochimaru." "Orochimaru, huh? I'll remember that. But I have to go now. My friend's waiting," Sakumo said before rushing back to the inpatient ward. Orochimaru stood there for a moment, watching Sakumo disappear down the hall, feeling the weight of the 60,000 Ryo in his hand. "Hataki Sakumo," Orochimaru whispered to himself, a faint smirk appearing on his face. The encounter had been unexpected. After visiting Navaki, Orochimaru had overheard Sakumo's conversation with the staff. Deciding on the spot, Orochimaru had chosen to offer a favor, even if it might seem insignificant in the grand scheme of things. After all, who could predict how Sakumo's future would unfold now that Orochimaru was here, altering the course of history? As night fell and the sky grew dark, Orochimaru took a deep breath, looking out toward the village. His work here today was done. He had helped Sakumo, and even visited Navaki. With a shrug, Orochimaru turned and headed home, his thoughts already drifting toward what lay ahead. A good night's sleep was in order. Chapter 58, Orochimaru had made significant scientific progress, at least by Konoha's standards. However, he wasn't ready to reveal all of his discoveries just yet. He preferred to keep the more significant results to himself, saving them for the right time or for his own future use. Occasionally, he'd share a minor invention, but nothing that could truly jeopardize his long-term plans. He knew that his destiny was uncertain. If he were to ever leave the village, he would need powerful tools to protect himself. His research had been slow, and the path to scientific breakthroughs was long and grueling. When he thought about how quickly someone like Naruto Uzumaki grew in power from a rookie genin to someone who could stand against a goddess like Kaguya in just 5 years, Orochimaru couldn't help but feel a bit frustrated. By comparison, Orochimaru had spent the past 3 years in Konoha, and while his progress was impressive, it was only scratching the surface of what he knew he could achieve. He understood that science and technology would eventually give him power far beyond that of any ninja. Still, the time required for such research, and the isolation that came with it, weighed heavily on him. He remembered that in the original story, during his later years, he had a loyal and capable subordinate, Kabuto Yakushi, who shared his passion for scientific research. But Kabuto wouldn't be born for at least another 20 years, so for now, Orochimaru was on his own. He knew he needed subordinates if he was to make significant progress. Someone to share the burden of research and carry out tasks for him. He spent hours that night pondering possible candidates, but by the time he reached the middle of the night, he had come to a disheartening conclusion: there was no one suitable. Some were skilled, but lacked the knowledge he needed. Others had the right status or potential, but their abilities fell short. In the end, Orochimaru decided he would have to wait. Timing, as always, was crucial. The next morning, Orochimaru made his way to the Hokage's office, ready to take on another mission. His experiments were currently in a phase where the cells were still growing, so he had some free time. He figured it would be useful to complete a few more missions, broaden his experience, and see more of the world beyond Konoha. However, when he arrived, Hirusan had some unexpected news for him. "Orochimaru, given your current abilities, only B-level and above missions are suitable for your growth. But to put your potential employers at ease, you'll need to pass a test. A test? Orochimaru's golden eyes narrowed slightly. The Chunin exam? Exactly. For Orochimaru and his team, C and D-level missions were of little interest. They were mostly menial tasks, far below their abilities. But higher-level missions often came with skeptical employers, people who doubted the capabilities of such young ninjas. Orochimaru recalled the trouble they had with Bach, the merchant who had doubted their skills due to their age. Hirusan had taken that into account, deciding that it was time for Orochimaru, Tsunade, and Jiraiya to take the Chunin exam. Once they were promoted to Chunin and donned the official vest, no one would question their competence again. Understood, Orochimaru nodded. We'll take the exam. To him, the Chunin exam was merely a formality. After being in this world for so long, Orochimaru had come to understand that the Chunin exam was quite different from the one depicted in the original story. What most people knew was the politically motivated, inter-village version of the Chunin exam, a grand spectacle designed to showcase military power and foster relations between nations. That version only took place once every few years, and only invited participants from allied or neutral countries. The real Chunin exam, however, was much simpler. It was held every 6 months and was strictly an internal affair, only for Konoha's own ninjas. Any genin whose Jonin sensei deemed them ready could participate, regardless of age or background. Some, like Kakashi Hataki, were promoted at an extremely young age, while others, like Might Dai, remained genin well into their 30s or 40s. At the training grounds, when Jiraiya heard about the Chunin exam, he was bursting with excitement. All right. Jiraiya-sama, will give it my all for the Chunin exam, he shouted enthusiastically. Tsunade rolled her eyes, her head full of frustration at Jiraiya's antics. That idiot is always so over-enthusiastic. Orochimaru watched Jiraiya with a contemplative look. He couldn't help but wonder where Jiraiya's boundless energy came from. Was it pure willpower, or did this guy have some kind of hidden stimulant? Chapter 59. Although Konoha is enjoying a relatively peaceful period, the war only ended less than a year ago. Diplomacy with neighboring countries isn't as friendly or stable as it would be during more peaceful times, like in the 60th year of Konoha. Because of this, the upcoming Chunin exam will only have participants from within Konoha itself. The Chunin exam was scheduled to take place in half a month, and during that time, Orochimaru, Jiraiya, and Tsunade focused on their training in preparation. At the training grounds, Orochimaru was sparring with Jiraiya while Tsunade sat off to the side, watching the battle with an amused expression. Every time Jiraiya was knocked back, Orochimaru would calmly offer advice. You're already stronger than most genin, Orochimaru said as Jiraiya was sent flying once again. You don't need to push yourself this hard. Ugh, you're my goal. Jiraiya replied, panting as he lay sprawled out on the grass, struggling to catch his breath. Come on, Orochimaru. Jiraiya said determinedly, despite his exhaustion. I've figured out how to break your illusions. This time, you won't get me. Tsunade walked over, shaking her head at Jiraiya's stubbornness. Jiraiya, I think you should rest. Your chakra's almost completely depleted. If you push any harder, you'll just hurt yourself. Chakra is the combination of physical and spiritual energy. It's drawn from the 130 trillion cells in a ninja's body, used to perform ninjutsu and stored within their body for use. Once a portion of chakra is expended, a ninja can recover it by resting or taking special pills. However, when a ninja's chakra reserves run completely dry, their body is pushed to its limits. Overexertion in such a state can be dangerous. The body starts to draw from its remaining reserves of physical and mental energy, potentially causing mental and physical breakdowns that could even lead to sudden death. In most cases, ninjas are careful to save some chakra for emergencies to avoid these dire consequences. When chakra runs out completely, exhaustion sets in. It's a dangerous state, especially during combat, where fatigue can leave a ninja vulnerable. If a ninja still tries to use ninjutsu by overexerting their chakra, it's akin to borrowing against their life force. Pushing too far, like Kakashi did during the Great Ninja War, could result in death. Tsunade's concern wasn't unfounded, and Jiraiya's situation wasn't ideal. She knew that if he continued, it would be dangerous. "Hey, Tsunade, are you worried about me?" Jiraiya perked up, his eyes lighting up at the possibility. "What?" "Don't flatter yourself," Tsunade responded with a roll of her eyes. "I just don't want to be stuck with dead weight during the Chunin exam." Jiraiya sighed dramatically and flopped back onto the ground, staring at the sky. "I knew it, but you're right. I'll rest up and recover my chakra." "Hey, Orochimaru. You've been using more ninjutsu than me, but you don't seem tired at all. What's your secret?" It had taken Jiraiya this long to realize that something was unusual about Orochimaru's chakra reserves. Given the intensity of their training, he should have been tired by now too. But Orochimaru seemed fine, his movements precise and deliberate as always. Jiraiya had never noticed before because they had never trained this hard. But after pushing himself to his limit, he finally realized that Orochimaru's chakra capacity was far beyond his own. Orochimaru responded calmly, "I have more chakra than you." This stunned Jiraiya. But ever since Orochimaru had undergone his physical enhancements, particularly using the Gene Enhancement Serum, his body had grown far stronger. Now, his chakra capacity had more than doubled. "More chakra than me." Jiraiya blinked in disbelief before slumping back to the ground, staring up at the sky in defeat. "I can't believe this. How can this be happening? I've trained so hard, and now I can't even compare to you in terms of chakra? I'm not accepting this. This isn't fair." Jiraiya shouted dramatically, using the last of his energy. "You don't have to accept it," Tsunade chimed in, delivering a well-timed jab. "Orochimaru is a genius, and you're just a weakling." That hit Jiraiya hard, causing even more mental damage than Orochimaru's sparring had caused physically. At that moment, he felt something inside him shatter as he stared up at the sky, letting out a frustrated scream. "I am not the guy who just gives up." Chapter 60, Time Flies. As everyone focused on their training, half a month passed in the blink of an eye, and the Chunin exams were about to begin. In Konoha, the Chunin exam wasn't anything new. The villagers and ninjas had become quite used to it, since it happened twice a year like clockwork. Most of them had grown tired of watching the semi-annual selection process. Only those ninjas who didn't have any missions or were simply bored would bother to watch. Of course, the daily tasks for many ninjas were mundane and tedious, so this event was a bit of excitement. During the Chunin exams, they could enjoy the added thrill of gambling on the outcome. The gambling aspect injected some fun into an otherwise ordinary part of village life. "Oh, there are so many people this time," Jiraiya said, surprised as they arrived at the waiting room for the Chunin selection. The classroom was massive, yet it was still packed with a large crowd. It was far more crowded than Jiraiya had expected. There had to be several hundred people there, a stark contrast to the 100 or 200 participants he remembered hearing about in the original story. Orochimaru wasn't surprised in the least. He had already predicted this outcome. The gap between the real world and his memories was something he had come to terms with. After all, think of the Fourth Great Ninja War, where the allied shinobi forces numbered around 80,000. Given the distribution among the 5 major nations, Konoha being the most powerful had contributed at least 20,000 ninjas. Even after suffering heavy casualties from previous wars, they still managed to field such a large force. With that in mind, Orochimaru estimated that Konoha, in its current state, likely had a total ninja population of around 30,000. Out of those 30,000 ninjas, how many were Jounin? How many Chunin? How many were still Jinin? Jounin were the elite, the strongest fighters in the village. They made up the smallest percentage of the ninja population, less than 1/10. Chunin and Special Jounin made up the bulk of the forces, about half. Jinin, the lowest rank, accounted for roughly 30% of the total ninjas. In other words, Out of 30,000 ninjas, Konoha likely had close to 10,000 Chunin. Even if only a small fraction of them signed up for the Chunin exams, that still left 1 or 2,000 participants in total. That's why the classroom they entered now had hundreds of people crowded inside. The ages of the participants varied widely. Some were children around Orochimaru's age, while others were in their 20s or even uncles in their 40s. This didn't surprise Orochimaru at all. In this world, it wasn't unusual to see such a wide age range for the Chunin exams. After all, while every ninja might start out as a Chunin at the same age, not everyone advanced to Chunin at the same pace. For some, it took years. For others, like Kakashi in the future, it could happen at a very young age. For some unfortunate ninjas, they might remain Chunin their entire lives, unable to advance beyond that level, even into their 40s or 50s. The Chunin exams were a place where these gaps became especially visible. As Orochimaru, Jiraiya, and Tsunade entered the room, they drew attention from several participants. A few older Chunin near the door smirked and exchanged mocking comments. Haha, looks like there's a lot of kids this year who aren't afraid of dying, one of them snickered. Yeah, they should know that during peacetime, there's no rush to take the Chunin exam. But look at them, they're still eager to sign up. They probably don't realize how much harder the Chunin exam has gotten over the years. These brats will figure it out once they get a taste of the real thing. There's always some clueless kids who think they can make it, but they'll only understand once they've been taught a bloody lesson. Their taunts were directed at Orochimaru and his team. However, most of the other Chunin, especially those further away in the room, were too focused on their own preparations to pay attention. These guys don't look too weak, Tsunade said, calmly assessing the group. Jiraiya, however, was more interested in something else. Hey, look over there, he said, pointing excitedly to a corner of the room. That white-haired guy was there the other day. Orochimaru and Tsunade followed Jiraiya's gaze and saw a white-haired boy deep in conversation with a group of his companions. It was none other than Hataki Sakumo, the boy they had encountered before. As Sakumo noticed the three of them entering the classroom, he paused, said something to his companions, and then made his way over to them. Hey, he's coming over, Jiraiya said nervously, swallowing hard. Orochimaru, do you think he heard me call him white-haired dude? What if he's mad and wants to beat me up? Jiraiya's reaction was as comedic as ever. His thought process always seemed to work differently than most people's. They hadn't even started the exam yet, no one would get into a fight at this stage. Sakumo reached them, and before Jiraiya could panic any further, he smiled at Orochimaru and said, "Oh, Orochimaru, we meet again." "Indeed," Orochimaru replied, nodding. "Thanks again for your help last time," Sakumo said, bowing slightly. "You're welcome," Orochimaru said simply. Tsunade and Jiraiya, who had been watching the exchange, were both surprised. "Wait, you two know each other?" Tsunade asked. "Yeah, when did that happen?" Jiraiya added. "How come I didn't know about this?" Sakumo chuckled softly and recounted the story of how he and Orochimaru had met at the hospital. At the moment, Sakumo was still only an 11-year-old boy, and his demeanor was much shyer and more reserved compared to the future legend he would become. Much like how Naruto met Neji during the Chunin exams in the original series, this was just the beginning of the story for Sakumo. "Oh, I see," Jiraiya said, breaking into a wide grin. "I'm Jiraiya, by the way. I'm this guy's teammate. Maybe we'll run into each other during the exam." "Haha, if we do, go easy on me," Sakumo said with a smile. "Don't worry, I won't go too hard on you," Jiraiya began to boast, but before he could finish, Tsunade smacked him on the head. "Tsunade! What was that for?" Jiraiya groaned, clutching his head in pain. "Why'd you hit me? Do you even need to ask?" Tsunade sighed in exasperation. "You're bragging again. You always do this." "Bragging? I'm not bragging. I'm just saying." Tsunade cut him off again, grabbing him by the ear. "Come with me, you idiot." As she dragged Jiraiya away, Orochimaru and Sakumo exchanged an amused glance. That's the end of this tale for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in part 4. Peace.